Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that's going to absolutely blow your mind. What if Naruto was Shanks' reincarnation? I'm talking about the Nine Tails Jinchuriki carrying the memories and will of one of the most legendary pirates in One Piece history. Now listen, this concept is absolutely broken for so many reasons. First off, we're talking about Conqueror's Haki, the rarest form of Haki that can literally knock people unconscious with pure willpower, being wielded by someone who already has the Nine Tails chakra. Imagine that fusion. We're talking about a power that can dominate reality itself. Shanks was so feared that just his presence on Whitebeard's ship was enough to split the sky. And now you're putting that legendary willpower into Naruto's body? That's insane. But here's where it gets even more epic. Shanks wasn't just powerful. He was a master strategist and natural leader who could turn enemies into allies with pure charisma. Now imagine Naruto, who already has that never-give-up attitude, suddenly remembering how to command respect from the most dangerous people in the world. We're talking about someone who goes from dead last to absolutely untouchable overnight. So we thought, what if we took this concept and made it trigger during the Wave mission? That moment when Naruto first truly feels the weight of protecting his bonds. Picture this. Naruto awakens to Shanks' memories just as Haku seemingly kills Sasuke, unlocking abilities that don't even exist in the ninja world. He gets secret training from Itachi and Kisame, develops a relationship with Ino that's built on genuine partnership, and eventually becomes a Shadow Kage, working to reshape the entire ninja system. We're talking about a story where Naruto doesn't just become Hokage, he revolutionizes what it means to be free in a world built on control. If this sounds as epic to you as it does to me, smash that like button, hit subscribe for more absolutely broken crossover concepts, and ring that notification bell because trust me, you don't want to miss what we've got coming. All right, let's dive into this masterpiece.
The mist clung to the unfinished bridge like a shroud, thick and oppressive in the early morning light. Naruto Uzumaki crouched behind a wooden beam, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched his teammate, his friend, trapped within Haku's deadly ice mirrors. Sasuke, he screamed, but his voice seemed to die in the cold air. Through the translucent walls of ice, he could see Sasuke's form, battered and bleeding, moving with increasing desperation as Senbon needles found their mark again and again. Each impact made Naruto's chest tighten with something he'd never felt before, not just anger, but a crushing, overwhelming sense of helplessness. I have to do something, I have to save him. But what could he do? He was just Naruto, the dead last, the class clown, the kid everyone ignored or despised. His strongest jutsu was the shadow clone technique, and even that felt pathetic against this enemy's speed and precision. You cannot save your friend, Haku's voice echoed from within the mirrors, calm and emotionless. This is the reality of the shinobi world. The weak die and the strong survive. Shut up, Naruto roared, but even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. Was Haku right? Was he too weak? Was he going to watch Sasuke die because he couldn't? The thought stopped as he saw it happen. Sasuke, moving to protect him from a barrage of Senbon, took the needles meant for Naruto. His teammate's body went rigid, then collapsed, kunai slipping from nerveless fingers. Sasuke. Time seemed to slow. The weight of it, the crushing, unbearable weight of watching someone precious to him fall because he wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't enough, crashed down on Naruto like a tidal wave. And then something else crashed down with it. Memories. A different face, weathered and scarred, looking up at a different sky. The taste of salt air and the creak of ship's timber. A voice, his voice, but older, wiser, making a promise. I'll protect my Nakama no matter what. The sting of failure, a friend's blood on wooden planks, the weight of responsibility that came with power, and the heavier weight of not being strong enough when it mattered most. A captain protects his crew, always, even if it costs him everything. Naruto's eyes snapped open, but they were different now. The bright blue hadn't changed, but there was something deeper in them, a weight, a gravity that hadn't been there moments before. His breathing steadied, even as the Nine Tails chakra began to leak from his body. But this wasn't just the fox's power. Something else stirred within him, something that felt like the ocean's depth and the storm's fury combined. You're wrong, Naruto said, his voice carrying a strange new authority that made even Haku pause. The strong don't survive by abandoning the weak. The strong survive by protecting what matters most. He stood slowly and the movement felt different, more balanced, more purposeful. His hand moved to the kunai at his belt, but the grip was wrong, too formal, like he was holding something else entirely. A sword? I should be holding a sword. In my nakama, the word felt foreign on his tongue, yet perfectly natural. My friends matter more than my life. The red chakra of the nine tails blazed around him, but there was something else now, an invisible pressure that made the air itself seem to thicken. Haku's mirrors trembled slightly, hairline cracks appearing in the ice. Naruto's eyes swept the dome of mirrors, and for a split second he could see it, not with his eyes but with something deeper. He could sense Haku's position, predict his next move, feel the flow of chakra and intention like currents in water. Observation. Haki whispered a voice in his mind that sounded like his own but older. Feel their intent, know their heart. There, Naruto moved, faster than he'd ever moved before, his kunai slicing through the air toward a mirror that looked identical to all the others. But he knew Haku was there, could feel the boy's presence like heat from a flame. The blade connected and Haku stumbled out of his jutsu, eyes wide with shock. Impossible, how did you? Naruto didn't answer with words. Instead, he let his fist speak for him, and when it connected with Haku's mask, there was something harder than just flesh and bone behind it. The porcelain shattered and Haku flew backward, crashing into the bridge's support beams. Armament. Haki, the voice whispered again, your will made manifest. But Naruto wasn't listening to the voice anymore. He was running toward Sasuke's still form, panic replacing the strange clarity that had filled him moments before. Sasuke, come on, he dropped to his knees beside his teammate, hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. They're weak, but don't you dare die on me, you bastard. Not when I finally. Finally what? The memories were clearer now, settling into place like pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he'd been trying to solve. Another life, another time, another crew of people he'd called family. The weight of leadership, the burden of making decisions that kept everyone alive. The understanding that true strength wasn't about being the strongest, it was about making everyone around you stronger. Naruto. He looked up to see Sakura running toward them, her face pale with fear. Behind her, Kakashi-sensei was finishing his battle with Zabuza, but their teacher's visible eye kept flicking toward Naruto with something that looked like confusion. He's alive, Naruto said, and his voice still carried that strange new weight, but he needs medical attention. What happened to you? Sakura asked, kneeling beside Sasuke but staring at Naruto. You're different. Different? Yes, he supposed he was. The memories were fully integrated now, 17 years of being Naruto Uzumaki, overlaid with the experiences and wisdom of someone else. Someone who had understood what it meant to bear the weight of protecting others. Red-haired Shanks, the name whispered through his mind. Emperor of the Sea, Captain, Protector. I remembered something important, Naruto said simply, helping to lift Sasuke as Sakura worked to stabilize him. I remembered what it means to protect the people you care about. Across the bridge, he could see Haku struggling to sit up, blood trickling from beneath his shattered mask. There was no hatred in Naruto's eyes as he looked at the boy, only understanding. Haku had been protecting someone too, in his own way. That was something Naruto could respect, even if they'd stood on opposite sides. Is it over? Sakura asked, her voice small. Naruto looked out over the bridge, toward the horizon where the mist was finally beginning to clear. In his mind, he could see what this place would become, a symbol of connection, of people working together despite their differences, a bridge between worlds. But more than that, he could see what he needed to become. Not the Hokage, perhaps, that dream felt smaller now, more limited, something greater, someone who could change not just a village, but an entire world. Someone who could ensure that no child would ever have to carry the weight he'd carried, alone and unwanted. Yeah, he said softly, his hand unconsciously moving to pat Sasuke's shoulder in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. This part is over. But as he spoke, Naruto could feel it, the vast ocean of possibility stretching out before him. This was just the beginning. The weight of bonds, the responsibility of strength, the burden of protecting those who mattered most. And I'll carry it all, he thought, the determination settling into his bones like an anchor. Because that's what it means to be a captain. That's what it means to be free. Behind him, Kakashi's eye narrowed thoughtfully as he watched his student. There was something different about Naruto now, something in the way he carried himself, the way he looked at the world around him. something that felt almost familiar. But that was a mystery for another day. For now, they had a bridge to finish and a team to heal. The mist continued to clear, and in the distance, the first rays of true sunlight began to break through the clouds. The training ground was empty except for the rhythmic thunk of kunai hitting wood. Naruto stood before a practice post, his movements precise and controlled in a way that would have been impossible just days ago. Each throw carried the weight of experience that shouldn't have belonged to a 12-year-old boy. But I'm not just 12 anymore, am I? The memories had settled now, no longer the chaotic flood they'd been on the bridge. Shanks's experiences lay alongside his own like a second layer of consciousness, accessible when needed, but not overwhelming. Still, the integration was challenging. Your form's improved. Naruto spun, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Kakashi stood at the edge of the training ground, his visible eye studying Naruto with an intensity that made the boy's skin crawl. Sensei, Naruto straightened, trying to push down the wariness that Shanks's memories brought to the surface. In another life, unexpected visitors had rarely brought good news. I've been practicing. Practicing? Kakashi's tone was carefully neutral. Is that what you call what happened on the bridge? There it was, the question Naruto had been dreading. How could he explain that he'd somehow gained the memories and instincts of a man who had never existed in this world? That he could feel abilities stirring within him that had no place in the shinobi arts? I don't know what you mean, Naruto said, but even he could hear how hollow the words sounded. Kakashi stepped closer and Naruto caught the subtle shift in his sensei's posture, ready for action but not yet committed to it. Your fighting style changed mid-battle, your speech patterns, even the way you carry yourself is different. His eye narrowed. People don't just develop that kind of presence overnight, Naruto, so I'll ask again, what happened to you? Before Naruto could formulate an answer that wouldn't sound completely insane, a familiar sensation prickled at the edge of his awareness. His head snapped toward the tree line, muscles tensing. Someone's watching us. The feeling was different from normal chakra sensing, deeper, more intuitive. He could sense not just presence, but intent. Whoever was out there wasn't planning to attack immediately, but they were definitely evaluating, studying. We're being watched, Naruto said quietly. Kakashi's eye widened slightly. The boy couldn't have sensed their observers, they were too well hidden, their chakra too carefully suppressed. Yet Naruto was looking directly toward their position. How many? Kakashi asked, playing along while his mind raced. 2, Naruto's voice carried absolute certainty. One feels familiar, the other is dangerous, very dangerous. Impossible, even I can barely sense them, and he's nomming their exact number and relative threat levels. As if summoned by their conversation, 2 figures materialized from the shadows between the trees. Naruto's breath caught as he recognized them, the same 2 Akatsuki members who had appeared in the hotel hunting Sasuke. But this time, there was no Jiraiya to intervene. Uchiha Itachi, Kakashi said, his voice tight with tension, and Hoshigaki Kisame. The shark-like man grinned, showing rows of pointed teeth. Kakashi of the Sharingan and the Nine-Tails brat, his eyes fixed on Naruto with predatory interest. Though something's different about you, kid, your chakra feels strange. Itachi said nothing, but his dark eyes were locked on Naruto with an intensity that made the boy's skin crawl. There was something calculating in that gaze, as if the Uchiha was seeing something that others missed. What do you want? Kakashi demanded, stepping slightly in front of Naruto. Originally, the Uchiha heir, Itachi replied, his voice as emotionless as ever, but circumstances have changed. His gaze never left Naruto. Tell me, Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, when did you awaken? The question hit like a physical blow. Naruto's heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to remain still. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Itachi took a step forward and Naruto fought the urge to retreat. 3 days ago, you were a loud, predictable child. Today, you carry yourself like someone who has commanded others. Your chakra signature has layers now, so I ask again, when did you awaken to your previous life's memories? He knows. The realization sent ice through Naruto's veins. Somehow, he actually knows. Itachi, Kisame growled, what are you talking about, previous life? But Itachi ignored his partner, taking another step toward Naruto. I have dedicated my existence to preventing catastrophe, boy, and you You represent either salvation or destruction on a scale that dwarfs even the Nine Tails. His eyes began to shift, Tomo spinning as the Sharingan activated. Which will it be? Naruto felt something stir within him, not the Nine Tails chakra, but something else. The same invisible pressure he'd felt on the bridge, but stronger now, more controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had once commanded the respect of the most dangerous people in the world. That depends entirely on what you're planning to do about it. The pressure rolled outward like a wave, and Naruto had the satisfaction of seeing both Akatsuki members tense. Kisame's hand moved instinctively toward Samehada, while Itachi's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Conqueror's Haki, Itachi murmured so quietly that only Naruto caught the words. Impossible, that power doesn't exist in this world. But he knows the name, Naruto realized. How does he know the name? Kakashi looked between them, completely lost. The pressure he'd felt was unlike any chakra technique he'd encountered, and the way both Akatsuki members had reacted suggested it was something far more significant than a simple intimidation tactic. We need to talk, Itachi said finally, away from prying eyes and ears. I'm not going anywhere with you, Naruto said flatly. Not now, Itachi agreed, but soon, what you're becoming is too important to leave to chance. He glanced at Kakashi. Your sensei cannot help you with this. No one in Konoha can. They lack the knowledge, the perspective, and most importantly, the necessity. What necessity? Naruto demanded. Itachi's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a weight that spoke of terrible knowledge and impossible choices. The necessity of preparing for a war that will consume everything you care about if you're not strong enough to prevent it. With that cryptic statement, both Akatsuki members began to fade, their forms dissolving like mist. 3 days, Itachi's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. The old training ground where Uchiha once practiced at midnight. Come alone or don't come at all. But know this, the longer you wait to embrace what you truly are, the more people will die when the real enemy reveals itself. Silence fell over the training ground like a shroud. Kakashi stared at the space where the two criminals had been, his mind reeling with questions he didn't know how to ask. Naruto, he said finally, what did he mean about previous life memories? Naruto was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, Kakashi was startled by the depth of exhaustion in those blue eyes, not physical tiredness, but the bone-deep weariness of someone who had carried too much for too long. If I told you, Naruto said quietly, you wouldn't believe me. Try me. Another long pause, then, what do you know about reincarnation, sensei? Kakashi felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. Naruto. I remember being someone else. The words came out in a rush, as if Naruto had been holding them back by force of will. Someone who lived in a different world with different rules. Someone who made different choices and paid different prices. He looked up at Kakashi with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. And now I have to figure out how to be both people at once. Dear God, Kakashi thought, what has happened to my student? But even as the question formed, he realized it might be the wrong one to ask. Perhaps the better question was, what was his student becoming? And more importantly, would Konoha survive the transformation? As if reading his thoughts, Naruto smiled, but it wasn't the bright, innocent grin Kakashi remembered. This smile carried weight, authority, and just a hint of the storm that was coming. Don't worry, sensei, Naruto said, and for a moment, Kakashi could swear he heard the voice of someone much older speaking through the boy. I'm still on your side, it's just that my definition of your side has gotten a lot bigger. He turned and walked away, leaving Kakashi alone with more questions than answers and the growing certainty that everything was about to change. 3 days until midnight. 3 days to decide whether to trust a missing nin who claimed to be preventing catastrophe or to inform the Hokage about his student's impossible transformation. Kakashi looked up at the sky, where storm clouds were beginning to gather. Why, he wondered, do I get the feeling that the storm isn't coming from above? Meanwhile, elsewhere in Konoha, Sasuke stood before his own practice post, but his strikes lacked their usual precision. His mind kept drifting back to the bridge, to the moment when everything had changed. Naruto's transformation hadn't been subtle, not to someone who knew him as well as Sasuke did. The dead last had somehow become dangerous, competent, cool. And that was the part that burned most of all. Sasuke Uchiha, last of his clan, prodigy and genius, was supposed to be the cool one. He was supposed to be the one others envied, the one who drew admiring stares and whispered conversations about potential. But on that bridge, for those few crucial moments, it had been Naruto who commanded attention. Naruto who had moved with deadly precision. Naruto who had spoken with the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. How? The question ate at him like acid. How did the dead last suddenly become everything I'm supposed to be? His fist hit the post hard enough to split wood, and he welcomed the pain that shot up his arm. It was honest, at least, real in a way that nothing else seemed to be anymore. From across the training ground, he heard familiar voices, Sakura and Ino, arguing about something as usual. But as their words became clearer, Sasuke's blood turned to ice. Completely different now. Did you see the way he moved? It was like watching a completely different person. I know, and when he looked at me, it was like he could see right through me. Not in a creepy way, but like he understood things he shouldn't. The way he protected us was so mature, like he actually knew what he was doing for once. And did you notice how he held that kunai, like it was a sword or something? It was so elegant. They were talking about Naruto, his Naruto, the annoying, loud, stupid Naruto who was supposed to be beneath notice. And they were talking about him like he was some kind of hero. Sasuke's Sharingan activated without conscious thought, the world sharpening into crystalline clarity. But clarity, he was beginning to realize, could be its own kind of curse. Because with clarity came the undeniable truth, Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the dead last. And if Naruto wasn't the dead last anymore, then what did that make Sasuke? The abandoned Uchiha training ground felt like a graveyard at midnight. Broken practice posts stood like tombstones in the moonlight, and the silence carried the weight of a massacre that had happened years ago. Naruto crouched on a tree branch, every sense alert as he waited. This could be a trap, Shanks's memories whispered. Never trust a meeting you didn't arrange yourself. But his own instincts, Naruto's instincts, said otherwise. Whatever Itachi wanted, it wasn't to harm him, not yet anyway. The sound of footsteps on gravel announced their arrival. Two figures emerged from the shadows between the training posts, their red cloud cloaks billowing in the night wind. Itachi moved with the fluid grace of a predator, while Kisame's massive form radiated barely contained violence. Naruto dropped from his perch, landing silently on the packed earth. You came alone, as promised, he said, nodding the absence of any backup or surveillance. As did you, Itachi's dark eyes studied him, though I suspect you're more capable of handling yourself than you appear. Kisame snorted, still don't see why we're wasting time with the brat, Itachi. He's got the 9 tails, sure, but he's still just a kid. Show him, Itachi said simply. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Show him what? What you did 3 days ago, what you tried to do at the training ground. Itachi's Sharingan began to spin slowly. Show him why I'm interested in training someone who should be my enemy. Understanding dawned. This wasn't just about recruitment, it was about proving a point to Kisame. Naruto took a deep breath, feeling for that invisible pressure he'd discovered on the bridge. Conqueror's Haki, Shanks's memories supplied, the power to impose your will on the world itself. The pressure built slowly, radiating outward from Naruto's core like ripples on a pond. But this time, he didn't hold back. The force of his intent, his absolute refusal to be intimidated or controlled, crashed over both Akatsuki members like a tsunami. Kisame's eyes widened as he felt it hit him. It wasn't chakra, wasn't any technique he recognized. It was pure will, concentrated and directed with surgical precision. His hand moved instinctively toward Samehada, but the sword seemed to recoil from the pressure, as if even the blade could sense something beyond its understanding. What the hell? Kisame breathed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. Naruto let the pressure fade, but kept just enough to remind them who was choosing to restrain himself. Satisfied. Kisame stared at him for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass and distant thunder. Well, I'll be damned, the kid's got teeth after all. More than teeth, Itachi observed. That power, it reminds me of the ocean during a storm, vast, unpredictable, and capable of drowning entire fleets. He looked at Kisame meaningfully. Familiar, doesn't it? Something shifted in Kisame's expression. His laughter faded, replaced by a look of genuine interest. You're talking about the deep currents, the ones that can drag a ship down no matter how big it is. He studied Naruto with new eyes. That's what this feels like, the ocean's untamed power. Naruto felt a flicker of understanding. Kisame wasn't just interested in strength for its own sake. He was drawn to the kind of power that couldn't be contained or controlled, the force of nature itself. Why? Naruto asked. Why does that matter to you? Kisame was quiet for a moment, his shark-like features unusually thoughtful. I've spent my whole life in service to hidden villages, following orders from people who thought they could contain the ocean in a teacup. But you, he gestured toward Naruto, you've got the kind of power that doesn't bow to anyone, the kind that reshapes the world just by existing. And that's what we need, Itachi added quietly. The coming storm will require someone who can stand against forces that make even the Akatsuki look like children playing with kunai. What coming storm? Naruto demanded. You keep talking about catastrophe and war, but you haven't explained what you're actually trying to prevent. Itachi exchanged a glance with Kisame, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, the Uchiha spoke. Have you ever heard the name Madara Uchiha? Naruto shook his head, but something in Shanks's memories stirred, not recognition, but the instinctive understanding of someone who had faced legendary enemies before. He was the co-founder of Konoha along with the first Hokage. Officially, he died at the Valley of the End decades ago. Itachi's voice was carefully neutral. Unofficially, he survived, and he's been planning something called the Moon's Eye Plan, a jutsu that would trap the entire world in an eternal illusion. That's impossible, Naruto said, but even as he spoke, he realized how hollow the protest sounded. In a world where people could breathe fire and walk on water, what was really impossible? Is it? Itachi asked. You carry the power of a previous life that never existed in this world. If reincarnation across dimensions is possible, why not a jutsu that affects reality itself? The logic was uncomfortably sound. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Even if that's true, he said, why tell me? Why betray the Akatsuki to warn someone you're supposed to capture? Because the Akatsuki believes they're working toward peace, but they're actually gathering the tools Madara needs to complete his plan. Itachi's Sharingan spun faster. And because someone with your unique perspective might be the only one capable of stopping him. My perspective. You remember being free? Kisame said unexpectedly. Both Naruto and Itachi looked at him in surprise. That power of yours, it tastes like freedom. Not the kind politicians talk about, but real freedom. The kind that can't be taken away or controlled. He grinned, showing those shark teeth again. That's what the ocean taught me. That's why I'm willing to bet on you instead of Madara's twisted dream. Naruto felt something click into place. This wasn't just about preventing catastrophe. It was about preserving the possibility of true freedom in a world that seemed determined to cage everyone in systems of control. What would training involve? He asked. Everything your village cannot teach you, Itachi replied. Advanced combat techniques, yes, but also strategic thinking, leadership under pressure, and most importantly, how to hide your true capabilities until the moment you need them most. Why the secrecy? Because if Madara realizes what you're becoming, he'll move to eliminate you before you're ready, Kisame said bluntly. And right now, you're not ready. That power of yours is impressive, but it's raw, unfocused. You need time to grow. Naruto considered this. Everything they were saying aligned with what Shanks's memories told him about leadership and warfare. Sometimes the most important battles were won before anyone realized they were being fought. What about my team, my village? Your team will notice changes, but they'll attribute them to normal growth, Itachi said. As for your village, Konoha is part of the system we're trying to protect, but they're also part of the problem. Their methods produce powerful shinobi, but not the kind of leader who can think beyond the hidden village system. And you think I can? You already are? Itachi's voice carried absolute certainty. That display of power wasn't just about dominance, it was about imposing your will on reality itself. That's the foundation of true leadership. Naruto looked up at the stars, thinking of another sky over another ocean, where a man with red hair had made similar choices about protecting what mattered most. If I agree to this, he said finally, what guarantee do I have that you won't just use me for your own purposes? None, Itachi said honestly. Except for the knowledge that our purposes align. You want to protect your precious people. I want to prevent the extinction of everything I've sacrificed to preserve. Kisame wants to see genuine strength triumph over systems of control. Right now, those goals point in the same direction. And when they don't? Itachi's smile was barely visible in the moonlight. Then we'll find out who's stronger. Naruto felt his own smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. There was something refreshingly honest about the threat. No pretty lies about eternal cooperation, just a mutual understanding that they were useful to each other for now. All right, he said, I'm in, but I have conditions. Name them. First, no interference with my team or my missions unless absolutely necessary. Second, if you're lying about Madara or your motives, I'll hunt you down myself. He let a hint of that pressure leak into his voice. And third, when this is over, when the real threat is dealt with, we go our separate ways. No strings, no obligations. Agreed, Itachi said without hesitation. Training begins tomorrow night. Same time but different location. I'll leave instructions where only you can find them. What kind of instructions? The kind that will teach you your first lesson in hiding information in plain sight. Kisame chuckled. This should be interesting. I haven't trained anyone in years. You're going to help? Naruto asked. Wouldn't miss it. Besides, someone needs to make sure you can actually survive what Itachi is going to put you through. The shark man's grin turned predatory, and I want to see just how deep your ocean really goes. As the two Akatsuki members prepared to leave, Itachi paused. One more thing, he said, your transformation hasn't gone unnoticed. Others will begin to take interest in you soon, some friendly, some decidedly not. Be careful who you trust. What about you? Naruto asked. Should I trust you? Trust that I need you alive and strong, Itachi replied. Everything else is negotiable. With that, both figures melted back into the shadows, leaving Naruto alone in the abandoned training ground. He stood there for several minutes, processing what had just happened. This is insane, his own thoughts protested. Training with criminals who want to kidnap me. But necessary, Shanks's memories countered. Sometimes you have to sail with pirates to fight worse pirates. As he made his way back toward the village, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, aspiring ninja of Konoha. He was something else now, something more dangerous, more necessary, and infinitely more alone. But that was the price of freedom, wasn't it? The choice to stand apart from systems that would shape you into something smaller than what you could become. Let the storm come, he thought, echoing words from a life he'd never lived but remembered perfectly. I'll be ready. Behind him, hidden in the shadows of the old Uchiha compound, a figure with spiral-masked face watched his departure with great interest. So, Obito murmured to himself, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki has made contact with my dear cousin. How unexpected. His Sharingan spun lazily as he considered this development. Plans within plans within plans, that was the art of true warfare, and perhaps it was time to add a few more layers to his own strategy. After all, every storm needed its eye. The Forest of Death lived up to its name. Ancient trees stretched toward a gray sky like gnarled fingers, their canopy so thick that noon felt like twilight. Somewhere in the distance, a scream echoed through the oppressive air, whether human or animal, it was impossible to tell. Team 7 crouched in the underbrush, studying the massive scroll they'd claimed from a trio of Rain Genin. The battle had been different. Where before Naruto might have charged in headfirst, this time he'd suggested a coordinated ambush that had ended the fight before it really began. That was too easy, Sasuke muttered, his dark eyes scanning the treeline. They should have put up more resistance. Maybe they were just weak, Sakura suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. Naruto said nothing, his attention focused on something the others couldn't sense. There, 200 meters northeast. A chakra signature he recognized, predatory and familiar, and another, this one twisted with malice and something that felt almost serpentine. Orochimaru, Shanks's memories whispered, a different kind of snake than the ones I knew, but a snake nonetheless. We need to move, Naruto said quietly, rolling up the scroll. Now. Why? Sasuke demanded. We have what we need. The smart play is to find a defensible position and wait out the remaining time. The smart play, Naruto replied, his voice carrying that strange new authority, is to not be here when the predators come hunting. As if summoned by his words, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Trees groaned and cracked as something massive moved through the forest, heading directly toward their position. "What is that?" Sakura whispered. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he extended his senses further. The approaching presence felt wrong, not just dangerous, but corrupt, ancient and hungry in ways that made his skin crawl. "Trouble," he said simply, "and it's not interested in the scrolls." The first sign of their pursuer was the sudden silence. Birds stopped singing, insects ceased their buzzing, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then came the laughter, low, sibilant, and filled with dark amusement. My, a voice called from the shadows. "What interesting children we have here." Orochimaru emerged from between the trees like a nightmare-given form. His pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light, and his golden eyes fixed on Team 7 with the intensity of a viper selecting prey. "Sasuke-kun," the Sannin purred, his voice dripping with false affection. "You've grown since our last encounter." Sasuke tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon pouch. Orochimaru. Indeed, those golden eyes shifted to Naruto and something flickered in their depths, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "And the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, how unexpected. Your chakra feels different, boy, more complex than the reports suggested." Naruto felt the familiar pressure building in his chest, not the Nine-Tails rage, but something deeper. The part of him that remembered commanding respect from the most dangerous people in the world. "If you're looking for the scrolls," he said calmly, "we don't have what you want." Orochimaru's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, but you do, both of you do." His gaze flicked between Naruto and Sasuke. "Such interesting vessels you would make, such potential." The attack came without warning. Orochimaru moved like liquid shadow, crossing the distance between them in the space between heartbeats. His target was clear, Sasuke, paralyzed by the Sannin's killing intent. But Naruto was faster. Observation Haki, his enhanced senses screamed. Left feint, real attack from the right, aiming for Sasuke's neck. Naruto's body moved before his conscious mind could process the information. He intercepted Orochimaru's strike with a kunai that suddenly felt heavier, harder, coated with something invisible but unmistakably real. Armament Haki. The clash sent shockwaves through the clearing. Orochimaru's eyes widened as his attack was not just blocked, but completely stopped by what should have been an ordinary blade wielded by an ordinary genin. "Impossible," the Sannin hissed. "What are you?" Instead of answering, Naruto pressed his advantage. His movements flowed like water, each strike precise and economical. This wasn't the wild, unpredictable style he'd shown in the academy. This was the combat form of someone who had fought emperors and lived to tell about it. Orochimaru retreated, his serpentine grace barely keeping him ahead of Naruto's assault. "Fascinating," he murmured, even as he deflected another strike that should have been impossible for a 12-year-old to execute. "You fight like someone with decades of experience." "Maybe I do," Naruto replied, and for just a moment, let a hint of Conqueror's Haki leak into his voice. The pressure hit Orochimaru like a physical blow. The ancient Sannin staggered, his eyes wide with something approaching shock. That power, it was unlike anything he'd encountered in decades of studying forbidden techniques. What are you?" Orochimaru whispered. "Someone you don't want to mess with," Naruto said simply. For a long moment, the clearing was silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. Orochimaru studied Naruto with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly fascinating specimen. "You've changed," the Sannin said finally. "Since our encounter at the village, something fundamental has shifted in you." His golden eyes glittered with avarice. "I must have you, both of you. Such potential should not be wasted on Konoha's limited vision." "That's not happening," Naruto said flatly. "Oh, but it is." Orochimaru's neck began to extend, stretching in ways that defied anatomy. "If I cannot have you willingly, I'll simply have to break you first." The battle that followed was unlike anything Sasuke or Sakura had ever witnessed. Naruto moved with fluid precision, every motion serving multiple purposes. When he blocked, he was already positioning for a counterattack. When he struck, he was simultaneously defending against moves that hadn't been made yet. But Orochimaru was one of the legendary Sannin with decades of experience and forbidden techniques at his disposal. For every advantage Naruto's new abilities gave him, the snake-like ninja had a counter. Impressive, Orochimaru panted as they broke apart again, but you're still just a child. You lack the chakra reserves, the endurance, the sheer experience to stand against me. He was right, and they all knew it. Naruto's enhanced abilities gave him an edge, but not enough to overcome the gap in raw power and skill. Think, Shanks's memories urged, you don't win fights like this with strength alone, you win them by changing the rules. Sasuke, Naruto called without taking his eyes off Orochimaru. Remember what I told you about working together. Sasuke blinked, startled. During their training sessions, Naruto had begun emphasizing combination attacks and coordinated strategies. At the time, it had seemed like an interesting development. Now, Sasuke realized it might have been preparation for exactly this kind of scenario. The Phoenix and Tiger formation, Sasuke said, understanding immediately. What are you two planning? Orochimaru asked, but there was a hint of wariness in his voice now. Instead of answering, both boys moved. Sasuke's hands flew through familiar seals while Naruto positioned himself at a precise angle. When the Uchiha's fire jutsu erupted from his lips, Naruto was ready. What happened next defied conventional ninja theory. Naruto's wind-natured chakra didn't just enhance Sasuke's flames, it transformed them. The fire turned white-hot, spinning in a controlled vortex that gave it both devastating power and surgical precision. Orochimaru barely managed to dodge, the combined attack singeing his cloak and leaving a crater where he'd been standing. Impossible, he breathed. That level of coordination requires years of practice, perfect chakra synchronization. Or just knowing how to read your partner, Naruto said, something you'll never understand. For the first time since the fight began, Orochimaru looked genuinely concerned. These weren't just talented children, they were becoming something more dangerous than the sum of their parts. This isn't over, the Sannin said, his form beginning to fade into the shadows. I will have you both, one way or another. Your potential is too great to waste on the weak philosophies of hidden villages. Looking forward to it, Naruto replied, but his casual tone was undermined by the way his hand trembled slightly as he lowered his kunai. When Orochimaru was gone, Sasuke and Sakura stared at their teammate in stunned silence. How? Sakura asked finally. How did you fight like that? How did you know exactly where he was going to attack? Naruto was quiet for a moment, weighing his words carefully. I've been training, he said finally, differently than before, and I guess I'm starting to understand what it really means to protect people. It wasn't really an answer, but it was all he could give them. The truth that he carried the memories and instincts of a man who had commanded some of the most dangerous people in another world was something they weren't ready to hear. That coordination technique, Sasuke said quietly. When did you figure out how to do that? I've been thinking about it for a while, Naruto admitted. We're stronger together than apart, that's just basic strategy. But Sasuke caught something in his tone, a weight that suggested those words came from hard-won experience. When had Naruto gained that kind of tactical insight? As they made their way toward the tower at the forest center, Sasuke found himself studying his teammate with new eyes. The dead last was gone, replaced by someone who moved with quiet confidence and spoke with casual authority. Someone who had just held his own against one of the legendary Sannin. How? The question ate at him. How did he become so much better than me? Naruto, Sakura said as they walked, that thing you did with your kunai when you blocked Orochimaru's attack. It looked like your blade was harder somehow. Must have been the angle, Naruto replied, but Sasuke caught the slight hesitation in his voice. Another lie, another secret, another piece of evidence that Naruto was becoming something beyond any of their understanding. And despite himself, despite his pride and his jealousy and his desperate need to be the strongest, Sasuke felt something he'd never experienced before when looking at his teammate. Respect. Damn it, he thought, when did the dead last become the one person I actually want to measure myself against? Behind them, hidden in the shadows between the trees, a figure with a spiral mask watched their progress with great interest. Fascinating, Albedo murmured. The Ninetales Jinchuriki continues to exceed expectations. Perhaps it's time to accelerate certain plans. His Sharingan spun slowly as he considered the implications. A Jinchuriki who could stand against the Sannin was already dangerous. One who was clearly hiding even greater abilities was potentially catastrophic to his long-term goals. But catastrophe, he reflected, could cut both ways. Perhaps it was time to see just how far this particular variable could be pushed. After all, every storm needed its center. And at the center of the storm, anything was possible. The training ground behind the Hokage monument was shrouded in pre-dawn mist, silent except for the rhythmic sound of metal against wood. Naruto moved through a sword kata that didn't exist in any Konoha manual, his movements fluid and precise despite the unfamiliar weight of the blade Itachi had given him. 3 weeks, he thought, adjusting his grip according to the muscle memory that felt both foreign and natural. 3 weeks of secret training, and I'm already moving like someone who's held a sword for years. Your stance is improving, came a quiet voice from the shadows. Naruto didn't startle, he'd sensed Itachi's approach long before the Uchiha spoke. Observation Haki had become as natural as breathing, a constant awareness of the intentions and emotions around him. Kisame says I'm still holding it like a kunai, Naruto replied, finishing the kata with a precise thrust that would have skewered an opponent's heart. Kisame has different standards than I do. Itachi emerged from the tree line, his dark eyes studying Naruto's form. He learned swordsmanship through necessity and brutality. You're learning it as an art. Which is better? Both, depending on the situation. Itachi gestured for Naruto to continue the exercise. Show me the combination we worked on yesterday. Naruto nodded, closing his eyes and reaching for that invisible pressure within himself. The Conqueror's Haki flowed through him like water, but this time he didn't release it outward. Instead, he let it coat his blade, his arms, his entire body like armor made of pure will. When he moved, the sword cut through the air with a sound like distant thunder. The practice post didn't just split, it disintegrated, the wood unable to withstand the force of his enhanced strike. Excellent, Itachi said, and there was genuine approval in his voice. You're beginning to understand that Haki isn't just another technique, it's the projection of your very essence into the physical world. It feels, Naruto paused, searching for words. It feels like I'm finally using power that actually belongs to me instead of borrowing it from the Ninetales. Because you are, Itachi moved to the pile of practice weapons they'd arranged. Chakra is energy that exists within everyone. Haki is something deeper, it's the strength of your spirit made manifest. The Ninetales chakra is vast and powerful, but it will always be foreign to you. This power is yours alone. Naruto set down the sword and wiped sweat from his forehead. The training was intense, more demanding than anything Kakashi had put them through, but it felt right in ways he couldn't explain. Speaking of the Ninetales, he said, Kisame mentioned something about chakra integration. What did he mean? Itachi's expression grew thoughtful. Your Haki and the Ninetales chakra are both powerful forces, but they operate on different principles. Chakra is energy that can be shaped and directed. Haki is will that imposes itself on reality, if you could find a way to merge them. I'd have something nobody could predict or counter, Naruto finished. Precisely, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The Ninetales is not a cooperative partner, and Haki requires absolute control over your own spirit. Attempting to force them together could destroy you from the inside. Naruto nodded, filing the information away for later consideration. One of the things he'd learned from Shanks's memories was patience. Not everything had to be mastered immediately. What about the other thing, he asked, the Genjutsu resistance training? Ah yes, Itachi's Sharingan began to spin lazily. That's perhaps the most important skill I can teach you. Illusions are the favored weapon of those who seek to control others, and you'll face many who try to twist your perceptions to their advantage. Without warning, the world around Naruto shifted. The training ground dissolved, replaced by the interior of Ikaraku Ramen. But something was wrong. The colors were too bright, the shadows fell at impossible angles, and Chuchai's smile was just a fraction too wide. Genjutsu, Naruto realized immediately, but instead of panicking or trying to break the illusion through chakra disruption, he did something else entirely. He pushed back with his haki. The technique wasn't something Itachi had taught him, it was pure instinct, the part of him that remembered being someone who refused to let anyone else control his perception of reality. The pressure of his will crashed against the genjutsu like a wave against a sandcastle. The illusion shattered. Impressive, Itachi said, his Sharingan fatting back to normal dark eyes. Most people take weeks to learn that level of resistance. You did it by instinct. It felt wrong, Naruto explained, like someone was trying to put chains on my thoughts. An interesting way to phrase it, but accurate. Itachi began gathering the practice weapons. Freedom of thought, freedom of choice, these are the foundations of what you're becoming. Anyone who tries to take that from you is your enemy, regardless of their stated intentions. As they prepared to leave, Naruto caught sight of movement in the trees. Not threatening, he would have sensed hostile intent immediately, but definitely watching. "We're being observed," he said quietly. "I know," Itachi didn't seem concerned. Blonde hair, purple outfit, trying very hard to remain hidden but failing because her emotions are too loud. Naruto blinked. "Ino. The Yamanaka girl has been following you for the past week. She's concerned about the changes in your behavior." Concerned, Naruto felt something warm settle in his chest, not the crushing weight of unwanted attention, but the gentle pressure of someone who actually cared about his well-being. "Should I talk to her?" "That depends. Are you prepared to maintain your cover story while managing her curiosity?" Itachi's tone was carefully neutral. The Yamanaka clan specializes in mind techniques if she becomes suspicious enough to involve her father. The warning was clear. Ino's growing interest could become a security risk if not handled carefully. "I'll be careful," Naruto said, "but I'm not going to push her away either." "Why not? It would be simpler." Naruto thought about that for a moment. Why was he reluctant to distance himself from Ino? It wasn't just attraction, though he'd be lying if he said he hadn't noticed how she'd grown more beautiful over the past few months. It was something deeper. "Because she sees me," he said finally. "Not the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, not the dead last, not even the Hokage successor. She sees me, and people who do that, they're worth protecting. Even if protecting them means risking exposure. Especially then." Itachi studied him for a long moment, and Naruto had the uncomfortable feeling that he was being evaluated for something. "Your predecessor felt the same way," Itachi said finally. "About his crew, his friends, the people who chose to follow him despite knowing the risks. It's a dangerous sentiment for someone in your position." "My predecessor? The man whose memories you carry, Shanks, wasn't it?" At Naruto's startled look, Itachi's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "I told you before, I make it my business to know things that might be important. Your power signature is unique, but it carries echoes, resonances of something that never existed in this world." "How do you know about him?" "Because I've encountered others like you before, not many and not recently, but enough to recognize the signs." Itachi shouldered his weapon pack. "The important question isn't how you came to carry those memories, it's what you choose to do with them." "And what do you think I should do?" What he would have done: protect what matters most, lead by example, and never let anyone tell you that freedom has to be sacrificed for security. Itachi paused. "But remember, he died for those principles. Make sure you're prepared to live for them." With that cryptic statement, the Uchiha vanished into the morning mist, leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that someone was still watching him. He looked up toward the tree where he'd sensed Ino's presence and called out softly, "You can come down now, he's gone." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with obvious reluctance, Ino dropped from the branches to land gracefully in the clearing. Her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment, but her chin was set with determination. "How long have you known I was there?" she asked. "About a week," Naruto admitted. "You're getting better at hiding your chakra, but your emotions are still too loud." "My emotions?" Ino crossed her arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Naruto hesitated, unsure how to explain observation haki without revealing too much. "It means I can tell when someone's worried about me, and you've been worried a lot lately." Ino's defiant expression softened. "Of course I'm worried. You've been acting completely different since the wave mission. Sakura thinks it's just normal growth, but I know better." She stepped closer, her blue eyes searching his face. "What happened to you, Naruto?" How much can I tell her? The question was more complex than it seemed. Ino was intelligent, perceptive, and genuinely cared about him, but she was also loyal to Konoha, and her father was a jounin with access to interrogation techniques. I grew up, he said finally. The wave mission showed me what was really at stake when we go on these missions. I realized I needed to be better. Better how? You're already stronger than most of our classmates. Not just stronger, smarter, more aware, he gestured to the destroyed practice post. There are threats out there that are beyond anything they taught us in the academy. If I want to protect the people I care about, I need to be ready for them. It was mostly the truth, just not the complete truth. Ino studied him for a long moment, and Naruto had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through his careful phrasing. You're hiding something, she said finally. Something big, but, she sighed, I trust you. I don't know why, but I do. Just promise me something. What? Promise me you won't try to handle everything alone. Whatever's happening, whatever you're preparing for, let your friends help. The word friends hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had called him that without reservation or condition? When was the last time someone had offered to share his burdens instead of asking him to carry theirs? I promise, he said, and meant it more than she could possibly know. Ino smiled, not the bright, artificial expression she wore around most people, but something genuine and warm. Good, because you're stuck with me now, whether you like it or not. I like it, Naruto said quietly, and was surprised by how much he meant it. As they walked back toward the village together, Naruto found himself thinking about Itachi's warning. Yes, caring about people was dangerous. It created vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit, but it also created something else, a reason to become stronger than those enemies could imagine. Behind them, hidden in the shadows of the forest, another watcher observed their departure with very different eyes. Sasuke had come to the training ground early, hoping to get in some solo practice before his team meeting. Instead, he'd witnessed his teammates' impossible display of skill and heard conversations that raised more questions than they answered. Secret training, advanced techniques, and now Ino following him around like a lovesick puppy. The jealousy burned in his chest like acid, not just because Naruto was getting stronger, though that was part of it, but because he was doing it without Sasuke. Because he'd found mentors who could teach him things Kakashi apparently couldn't, because he was moving forward while Sasuke felt like he was standing still. I'm an Uchiha, he reminded himself, the last of my clan. I'm supposed to be the prodigy, the one with unlimited potential. But watching Naruto destroy that practice post with a single strike, Sasuke couldn't deny the truth anymore. The dead last had surpassed him. And unless he did something about it soon, the gap would only continue to grow. As he made his way back to the village, Sasuke's hands clenched into fists. He needed power, real power, the kind that could match whatever Naruto was becoming. He needed to find Orochimaru. Meanwhile, in a hidden chamber beneath Konoha. The boy continues to develop at an alarming rate, reported a figure in a white mask. Our agents confirm that he's been meeting secretly with unknown individuals. Unknown, the voice from the shadows carried quiet menace. How can they be unknown? We have eyes everywhere in this village. They appear to be outside our normal surveillance network, possibly foreign operatives. Or possibly something else entirely. Danzo Shimura stepped into the light, his bandaged face thoughtful. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki has always been too unpredictable for my taste, but this new development, this could be opportunity. Your orders, sir. Watch, wait, and prepare a containment protocol. Danzo's visible eye glittered with cold calculation. If the boy becomes too dangerous to control through conventional means, we may need to consider alternative solutions. And if he discovers our surveillance, then we'll learn exactly how dangerous he's become. In the Hokage office, Hiruzen Sarutobi stared out the window at his village, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The reports had been trickling in for weeks, subtle changes in Naruto's behavior, improvements in his skills that seemed to come from nowhere, and now whispers of secret meetings and hidden training. Troubled thoughts, Hokage-sama. The third turned to see Kakashi standing in the doorway, his visible eye creased with concern. Tell me, Kakashi, Hiruzen said quietly, what do you make of your students' recent evolution? I think, Kakashi replied carefully, that Naruto is becoming exactly what we always hoped he would become. The question is whether we're prepared for what that actually means. Explain. We wanted him to be strong enough to protect the village. We wanted him to be wise enough to lead it. We wanted him to be independent enough to make his own choices. Kakashi moved to stand beside his Hokage. But strength, wisdom, and independence in someone with his power, that's not a tool we can control. That's a force of nature we can only hope to guide. Hiruzen nodded slowly, and if our guidance isn't enough, then we'd better hope we're on the same side. Both men stood in comfortable silence, watching the village they'd sworn to protect. Neither spoke the thought that was in both their minds. What happens when the force of nature decides it knows better than we do? The explosion that rocked Konoha could be felt from 3 miles away. Naruto was deep in the forest surrounding the village, working through an advanced chakra control exercise with Itachi, when the ground beneath their feet trembled. Birds erupted from the trees in panicked clouds, and in the distance, a pillar of smoke began to rise over the village walls. Pain, Itachi said simply, his Sharingan already spinning as he assessed the situation. He's earlier than expected. Pain, Naruto's blood turned to ice. The name was familiar from their strategy sessions, the leader of Akatsuki, the one collecting the tailed beasts. But I'm not ready, we haven't finished. You're as ready as you'll ever be. Itachi's voice cut through his panic like a blade. This is what we've been preparing for. The question is, will you trust your training or will you let fear make you weak? Another explosion closer this time. Naruto could feel it in his bones, the overwhelming pressure of chakra so vast it made the Nine Tails feel like a candle flame by comparison. My friends, he thought, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. Sakura, Kakashi-sensei, Hinata, Ino. I have to go, he said, but Itachi caught his arm. Wait, if you rush in blindly, you'll accomplish nothing but your own death. The Uchiha's grip was iron. Pain is not just powerful, he's experienced, strategic, and utterly ruthless. What's your plan? Plan? Naruto's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to run toward the village, to throw himself into battle without thought or preparation. But Shanks's memories whispered something different. A captain doesn't charge into battle. A captain ensures victory. I need information first, Naruto said, forcing himself to think strategically. How many bodies does Pain have? What are their abilities? Where will he strike first? 6 bodies, each with different powers, Itachi said rapidly. The Deva path can manipulate gravity, the Asura path is mechanized for combat, the animal path summons creatures, the Preta path absorbs chakra, the human path reads minds and extracts souls, and the Naraka path can interrogate and restore the others. Naruto absorbed this information with the part of his mind that remembered coordinating battles across multiple fronts. Weaknesses. They share vision but have a brief delay in communication. The real body, Nagato, controls them remotely from a hidden location. Kill the controller, end the threat. And if I can't find the controller, then you'll have to destroy all 6 bodies simultaneously, or they'll just keep coming back. A third explosion, and this time Naruto could see the orange glow of flames rising over the village walls. His enhanced senses caught something else, the faint sound of screaming carried on the wind. They're dying, he realized. My people are dying while I stand here planning. Go, Itachi said, releasing his arm. But remember, emotion without control is just another word for failure. Use your anger, don't let it use you. Naruto nodded once, then burst into motion. But this wasn't the wild, headlong rush he might have made weeks ago. This was the purposeful advance of someone who understood that speed without direction was just wasted energy. He moved through the trees like liquid shadow, his observation Haki stretched to its maximum range. The village came into view, or what was left of it. Entire districts had been flattened, reduced to rubble and flame. Bodies lay scattered in the streets like broken dolls. Pain's almighty push, Shanks's tactical knowledge supplied. He announced his presence by destroying half the village in a single attack. Naruto dropped into the ruins of what had once been a residential district, his enhanced senses immediately cataloging threats and opportunities. There, 200 meters north, a cluster of familiar chakra signatures. Team 7, along with several other shinobi, trapped in the rubble of what looked like a collapsed apartment building. But between him and them stood one of Pain's bodies, the animal path, a woman with short orange hair and dead, ringed eyes. She was methodically summoning creatures to hunt down survivors, each beast more massive and deadly than the last. I could try to sneak past, Naruto thought, but then she'd just keep killing people behind me. No, if he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. Naruto stepped into the open, making no attempt at stealth. Hey, ugly. The animal path turned toward him, her dead eyes showing no emotion as they registered his presence. Ninetales Jinchuriki, she said in a monotone voice, you will come with us. Yeah, that's not happening. The response was immediate. 3 massive summoning clouds erupted around the animal path, disgorging a giant rhinoceros, a bird that looked like it could swallow buildings, and something that might once have been a dog but was now the size of a small house. Naruto cracked his knuckles, feeling the familiar pressure building in his chest. Bring it on. The rhino charged first, its horn aimed directly at Naruto's center mass. But where weeks ago he might have dodged or tried to overpower it with brute force, now he did something different. He stood perfectly still until the last possible second, then stepped aside with minimal movement. As the beast thundered past, his hand shot out, fingers coated with armament haki, and struck a precise point just behind its skull. The rhinoceros collapsed immediately, its nervous system scrambled by the perfectly placed blow. The giant bird swooped down from above, talons extended to tear him apart. Naruto waited until it committed to its attack vector, then leaped, not away from it, but straight up, meeting it head-on in midair. Conqueror's Haki, he thought, and let the pressure explode outward. The bird's eyes went wide for just an instant, long enough for it to feel what it meant to be prey instead of predator. Then it crumpled, its will to fight completely shattered. That left the massive dog, which had been hanging back and watching the destruction of its pack mates with something approaching intelligence. When it finally moved, it was with the cautious precision of a predator that had learned to respect its opponent. But caution, Naruto reflected, only worked if you were strong enough to capitalize on it. The dog lunged, jaws wide enough to swallow him whole. Naruto met its charge with his own, one hand extended and glowing with the invisible armor of armament haki. His fist connected with the creature's snout with a sound like thunder. The impact sent shockwaves through the rubble around them, and the massive dog was literally lifted off its feet and hurled backward into a collapsed building. When the dust settled, the animal path was alone among the bodies of her summons, her dead eyes fixed on Naruto with something that might have been surprise. Impossible, she said, you are merely a child. I'm a lot more than that, Naruto replied, and his voice carried echoes of authority that belonged to someone who had once been called an emperor. The question is, are you going to keep throwing summons at me, or are we going to settle this directly? Instead of answering, the animal path raised her hands in a seal Naruto didn't recognize. But his observation haki screamed danger, and he moved without conscious thought. Something's coming, something big. The summoning cloud that erupted was larger than all the others combined. What emerged from it defied description, a creature so massive it blocked out the sun, with multiple heads and enough chakra to level what was left of the district. The King of Hell, Shanks's memories whispered, she's calling her strongest summon. But as the creature's shadow fell over him, Naruto felt something else stir, not just his own power, but something deeper, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The Ninetales chakra began to leak from his body, but this time it felt different. Instead of the usual rage and malevolence, there was something else, curiosity, perhaps, or even approval. Interesting, rumbled a voice in the back of his mind. You fight like someone who remembers what it means to be truly free. About time you showed up, Naruto muttered, then raised his voice to address the creature looming over him. You know what? I'm getting really tired of things trying to step on me. He let the pressure build, not just Conqueror's Haki, but something more. The Ninetales chakra swirled around him like liquid gold, but where normally it would have been chaotic and destructive, now it moved with purpose and control. This is it, he realized. This is what Itachi meant about integration. The power that erupted from him was unlike anything he'd ever felt. It wasn't just the sum of his abilities, it was something entirely new, born from the fusion of supernatural will and bestial fury. Golden chakra crackled with black lightning, and the very air around him seemed to thicken with power. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded both emperors and monsters. Kneel. The word hit the king of hell like a physical blow. The massive creature staggered, its multiple heads whipping back and forth in confusion as something it had never encountered before crashed against its consciousness. Conqueror's Haki enhanced by the Nine-Tails chakra, Naruto thought with growing amazement. Not just physical power, but spiritual dominance on a level that even summons can feel. The King of Hell's resistance lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then, slowly, impossibly, the massive creature lowered itself to the ground in a gesture of submission. The animal path stared in open shock. What are you? I'm someone who's tired of people hurting my friends, Naruto said simply. Then he moved. The distance between them vanished in an instant. The animal path tried to dodge, but Naruto's enhanced speed made her efforts look like slow motion. His fist, still coated with the fusion of Haki and Nine-Tails chakra, connected with her center mass. The pain body disintegrated. As the King of Hell vanished with its summoner's death, Naruto allowed his enhanced state to fade. The golden chakra receded, but he could still feel its presence, no longer foreign and hostile, but curious, almost friendly. Well, the Nine-Tails rumbled in his mind. That was unexpected. I haven't felt power like that since the old man was alive. The old man. The sage of 6 paths, the one who created us tailed beasts. There was something like respect in the fox's mental voice. Your will, it reminds me of his, the refusal to bow to anyone or anything, no matter how powerful. Before Naruto could process this revelation fully, a familiar scream cut through the air. He spun toward the sound, his enhanced senses immediately identifying the source. Sakura's voice raw with terror and desperation. Team 7. He moved without conscious thought, crossing the distance to their trapped position in seconds. What he found there sent ice through his veins. Kakashi was down, his body pinned beneath a massive piece of concrete. Sakura knelt beside him, her hands glowing with medical chakra, but her face pale with the knowledge that she wasn't strong enough to save him. And standing over them both, casual as if he were discussing the weather, was another of Pain's bodies, the human path. Ah, the orange-haired figure said as Naruto arrived. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, perfect timing. I was just about to extract some information from your sensei. Get away from them, Naruto said, his voice deadly quiet. Or what? The human path's dead eyes fixed on him. You'll fight me, you're strong, I'll grant you that. The destruction of the animal path was impressive, but I am Pain, I am a god, and gods do not fall to mere children. Then I guess it's a good thing, came a new voice from behind them, that he's not a mere child anymore. Naruto spun to see Ino emerging from the rubble, her purple outfit torn and dirty but her eyes blazing with determination. Behind her came Choji and Shikamaru, both looking battered but functional. Ino, get back, Naruto shouted. This isn't. Don't you dare, she interrupted, moving to stand beside him. Don't you dare try to handle this alone. We're a team, remember. She's right, Shikamaru said, though his usual lazy drawl was tight with tension. Troublesome as this is, we're stronger together. The human path laughed, a sound like breaking glass. How touching, children playing at being heroes. Very well, I'll kill you all together. He moved toward Ino, his hand reaching for her face with obvious intent, but he never made it. Naruto's observation, Haki had seen the attack coming before it was fully formed. His body moved with liquid precision, interposing himself between the Pain body and his friends. But this time, something was different. As he watched the human path's hand reaching toward Ino, toward someone who had chosen to stand with him despite the danger, something inside him snapped. Not broke, snapped into place. The power that erupted from him dwarfed what he'd shown against the animal path. Golden chakra blazed like a miniature sun, but now it was shot through with veins of black lightning that crackled with barely contained fury. The pressure of his conqueror's Haki hit everyone in a 3-block radius, and the human path actually staggered under its weight. You, Naruto said, and his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone present, made a mistake. What mistake? The human path gasped, clearly struggling against the pressure. You threatened her. What followed wasn't a fight, it was an execution. Naruto moved with speed that made his previous displays look sluggish, his enhanced state pushing him beyond the limits of what should have been possible for someone his age. Every strike was precisely placed, every movement calculated for maximum efficiency. The human path tried to fight back, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with bare hands. Naruto's fusion of Haki and Ninetales chakra made him not just stronger, but fundamentally more real than his opponent, as if he existed on a deeper level of reality. When it was over, when the second pain body lay in pieces among the rubble, Naruto stood over the remains with his power still blazing around him like armor made of will and fury. "Naruto," Ino whispered, and something in her voice, awe, fear, concern, cut through his enhanced state like a knife. He turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that wasn't entirely human, not malevolent, but vast, ancient, the gaze of someone who had stared down gods and found them wanting. Then he blinked and he was just Naruto again, tired, worried, and very much 12 years old. "Are you okay?" he asked, moving to check her for injuries. "Am I okay?" Ino stared at him in disbelief. "Naruto, what was that? How did you?" "Later," he said, gently but firmly. "Right now we need to help Kakashi-sensei and find the others." But as they worked to free their trapped teacher, Ino couldn't stop staring at the boy who had just single-handedly destroyed two of Pain's bodies. The boy who had moved with the grace of a master swordsman and struck with power that defied comprehension. The boy who had positioned himself between her and death without a moment's hesitation. When did I fall in love with him? She wondered. When did the annoying class clown become someone I'd follow into hell itself? And more importantly, when had he become someone powerful enough to actually lead the way out? As they pulled Kakashi from the rubble, the Scarecrow Ninja looked up at his student with eyes full of questions he didn't know how to ask. "Naruto," he said weakly, "what have you become?" Naruto met his sensei's gaze steadily. "What I need to be," he said simply, "to protect the people I care about." In the distance, another explosion rocked the village as the remaining Pain bodies continued their assault. But for the first time since the attack began, Naruto felt something other than desperation. He felt ready. Let them come, he thought, his enhanced senses already tracking the locations of the remaining threats. I'll show them what it means to threaten my home. The storm had finally arrived. And at its center stood a boy who remembered being an emperor, ready to remind the world what that actually meant. The crater where the Hokage Tower once stood stretched nearly a quarter-mile across, its edges still smoking from the devastating attack. Naruto stood at its rim, his enhanced senses tracking the remaining Pain bodies as they methodically destroyed what was left of his home. Four left, he counted grimly: Deva Path, Asura Path, Preda Path, and Naraka Paths. Behind him, Ino worked frantically to stabilize Kakashi while Shikamaru coordinated the evacuation of civilians. The sight of his friends, battered but alive, working together despite the overwhelming odds, sent warmth through his chest that had nothing to do with the Ninetales chakra. This is what I'm fighting for, he realized. Not just the village, but the people who chose to stand with me. Naruto, Kakashi's voice was weak but urgent. The Deva Path, it's the strongest, 5-minute cooldown between major attacks, but when it hits. I know, Naruto's eyes found the orange-haired figure standing at the crater's center, arms spread wide as if embracing the destruction around him. I can feel his power from here. You can't face him alone, even with whatever that new ability is. I won't be alone. Naruto turned back to his friends and something in his expression made them all go still. But I need you to trust me, all of you. Of course we trust you, Ino said immediately. But Naruto, this is insane. That thing destroyed half the village with a single attack. I know, that's why I need to end this now before he recovers enough to do it again. Shikamaru's eyes narrowed. You have a plan. It wasn't a question, and Naruto nodded. The real Pain Nagato is controlling these bodies remotely. He's somewhere in the village, hidden but close enough to maintain his connection. How do you know that? Because I can feel him. Naruto's voice carried absolute certainty. His chakra signature is like a beacon if you know how to look for it. The question is whether I can reach him before the Deva Path recovers. And if you can't? Naruto was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice carried echoes of someone who had once made impossible choices in the face of overwhelming odds. Then I'll have to remind Pain what it means to threaten an emperor's family. Before anyone could ask what he meant by that, Naruto was moving. But this time, he didn't charge directly toward the crater. Instead, he bounded across the rubble with purposeful precision, his enhanced senses guiding him toward a chakra signature that felt like concentrated anguish. There he thought, dropping into the ruins of what had once been a small apartment building, 2 blocks north of the crater, underground. The hidden chamber he found was a testament to Pain's planning. Medical equipment lined the walls, and in the center, connected to a massive chakra transmission device, lay the emaciated form of a red-haired man whose eyes held more pain than anyone should have to bear. Nagato, Naruto said quietly. The real Pain's eyes snapped open, focusing on him with effort. Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, you found me faster than expected. Your chakra is loud when you're not trying to hide it. Naruto stepped closer, nodding the black rods piercing Nagato's body and the mechanical legs that seemed to be the only things keeping him upright. You're the one controlling the 6 bodies. I am Pain, Nagato said, but his voice lacked the cold authority of his puppets. I am the one who will bring peace to this world through suffering. By destroying everything, Naruto gestured toward the ceiling, where the sounds of continued battle filtered down. By killing innocent people who never did anything to you. Pain is the only teacher, Nagato replied, but there was something hollow in his words. Only through experiencing true loss can humanity understand the value of peace. That's not peace, Naruto's voice carried the weight of Shanks' memories of battles fought not for conquest but for the freedom to choose one's own path. That's just another form of tyranny. You speak of things you don't understand, child. You've never experienced true loss, true. Haven't I? The words came out sharper than Naruto intended. I spent 12 years alone, hated by everyone in my village for something I had no control over. I've watched friends risk their lives for me, seeing good people die because I wasn't strong enough to protect them. Don't tell me I don't understand loss. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Nagato's eyes. Then why do you still fight for them? Why protect people who would see you destroyed? Because some of them don't. Naruto thought of Ino's determined face, of Kakashi's worried eyes, of Uruka-sensei's gentle smile. And those who do, they're worth protecting. They're worth becoming stronger for. Naive, Nagato whispered, but the word lacked conviction. Maybe, but I'd rather be naive and hopeful than wise and hopeless. Naruto knelt beside the broken man, his voice gentling. What happened to you? What made you think this was the only way? For a moment, Nagato was silent. Then, in halting words, he told the story of a war-torn village, of friends lost to senseless violence, of a teacher who had tried to show them a better way and died for his ideals. Jiraiya-sensei, Naruto breathed, you were one of his students. The greatest of his failures, Nagato said bitterly. He taught us that understanding could end conflict, that peace was possible through dialogue and compassion, but he was wrong. Peace only comes through strength, through making war too costly to contemplate. He wasn't wrong, Naruto said firmly. You are. The declaration hung in the air between them like a blade. Nagato's eyes blazed with anger, and the chakra rods in his body began to glow. You dare. I dare because I have to. Naruto's own power began to rise, golden chakra swirling around him like liquid sunlight. Because someone has to break this cycle of pain and revenge, and if that someone has to be me, then so be it. You cannot stop me, Nagato snarled. I am pain incarnate, I am. You're a broken man who gave up on hope, Naruto interrupted, and I'm someone who refuses to let you spread that despair to others. The battle that followed was unlike anything either of them had experienced. Nagato, despite his physical limitations, commanded power that dwarfed most of the legendary ninja in history. Chakra lashed out in waves that could have leveled mountains, and his mastery of the Rinnegan created techniques that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But Naruto was no longer the impulsive child who had left the village that morning. Months of training with Itachi had taught him patience, strategy, and most importantly, how to read an opponent's intentions before they became actions. Observation Haki, he thought, dodging a gravitational attack that would have crushed him to paste. He's powerful, but he's predictable, every technique telegraphed by the emotions behind it. And there were so many emotions: rage, grief, despair, and underneath it all, a desperate longing for the peace that had always seemed just out of reach. He's not evil, Naruto realized as he pressed his counterattack. He's just lost. The understanding changed everything. Instead of trying to overpower Nagato, Naruto began to fight differently. Each strike was calculated not just for physical damage, but for emotional impact. Each dodge was positioned to demonstrate a point. Each counterattack carried a message. You don't have to do this. There's another way. You can choose to stop. Why? Nagato gasped as Naruto's latest combination left him staggered but not fatally wounded. Why won't you just finish it? You have the power, I can feel it. You could end this right now. Because ending you won't fix anything, Naruto said, his golden aura pulsing with controlled power. It'll just make me into another version of pain, and the world has enough of those already. Then what? Nagato's voice cracked. What would you have me do? I've gone too far, done too much. There's no redemption for someone like me. There's always redemption, Naruto said firmly. As long as you're still breathing, you can choose to do better. Pretty words, Nagato whispered, but the dead don't forgive. The families I've destroyed won't suddenly embrace me because I feel sorry. No, they won't, but that doesn't mean you should stop trying to make amends. Naruto extended his hand toward the broken man. Help me rebuild what you destroyed. Use your power to protect instead of punish. Show the world that even someone who became pain can choose to become something else. Nagato stared at the offered hand for a long moment. In his eyes, Naruto could see the war between hope and despair, between the urge to continue down his dark path and the possibility of something better. The technique, Nagato said finally, the one that could bring back those who died today, it exists, but it would cost me my life. Then don't use it, Naruto said immediately. The dead are gone, but you're still here. You can still do good, still make a difference. Can I? Nagato's voice was barely a whisper. After everything I've done. Only one way to find out. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, Nagato wavered. Then, slowly, he reached out and took Naruto's hand. I don't know if I can be the man my sensei wanted me to be, he said quietly, but I can try. The power that flowed between them at that moment wasn't chakra or haki, it was something deeper. Understanding, perhaps, or simply the recognition that they were both students of the same teacher, both trying to honor the same dream in their own broken ways. Above them, the sounds of battle faded as the remaining pain bodies collapsed, their controller's will to fight finally exhausted. What now? Nagato asked. Now we go upstairs, Naruto said, helping the older man to his feet, and we start fixing what we broke. The sight that greeted them when they emerged from the hidden chamber was one that would be remembered for generations. Naruto Uzumaki, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, walking side by side with Nagato of the Rain, the man who had nearly destroyed Konoha single-handedly. The gathered shinobi, those who hadn't fled or fallen, tensed for another battle, but Naruto raised his hand and something in his presence made them pause. It's over, he said simply. The real fight was never with pain, it was with the despair that created him. Naruto, Ino's voice was soft, uncertain. She stood among the rubble with Kakashi leaning heavily on her shoulder, her blue eyes searching his face. What happened down there? We talked, Naruto said, and we remembered what we were both fighting for. Kakashi studied the scene with his one visible eye, taking in Nagato's obvious exhaustion and the strange sense of peace that seemed to radiate from both figures. And what was that? He asked carefully. Naruto looked out over the devastated village, his home, his responsibility, his precious people scattered among the ruins, and smiled. Not the bright, manic grin of his childhood, but something deeper and more genuine. The chance to build something better, he said, together. Later, as the sun set over the wounded village, Ino found Naruto sitting alone on what remained of the Hokage monument, staring out over the reconstruction efforts that had already begun. The golden chakra that had blazed around him during the battle was gone, but there was something different about him now, a weight, a presence that seemed to make the air around him more solid. Mind if I sit? She asked. Please, he patted the stone beside him, and she settled down close enough that their shoulders almost touched. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the villagers work together to clear rubble and tend to the wounded. Despite the devastation, there was something hopeful about the scene, people who had been strangers helping each other, barriers of clan and class temporarily forgotten in the face of shared necessity. "You're different," Ino said finally. "Yeah, I know. Not just stronger, different in here." She touched her chest over her heart, like you've seen something the rest of us haven't. Naruto considered her words carefully. How could he explain that he carried the memories of another life, another world where he'd learned that true strength came not from dominance but from the willingness to protect what mattered most? "I remembered something today," he said finally, "about what it means to lead." "Lead? A captain doesn't rule his crew through fear," Naruto said, the words coming from Shanks's memories but feeling perfectly natural on his tongue. "He earns their loyalty by being someone worth following, someone who makes them stronger just by being around." Ino studied his profile in the fading light. "Is that what you want to be, a captain?" "I want to be someone who can protect the people I care about." He turned to look at her, and she was struck by the depth of sincerity in his blue eyes. Someone who can make sure they never have to feel the kind of pain that drove Nagato to become pain. "And if that means standing against the whole world, then I'll stand against the whole world." The simple certainty in his voice sent shivers down her spine. This wasn't the boastful declaration of a child playing at being important. This was the quiet promise of someone who had already counted the cost and found it acceptable. "Naruto," she said softly, "earlier today when you protected me from that pain body, why did you do it?" "Because you matter to me," he said without hesitation. "Because you chose to stand with me even when it was dangerous. Because," he paused, searching for words, "because when I look at you I don't see someone who needs to be saved, I see someone worth fighting beside." Ino felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't look away. "Even though I'm not as strong as you." "Strength isn't just about power," Naruto said. "It's about courage, and you've got more courage than anyone I know." Before she could respond, he continued. "Today, when you stepped out of that rubble to stand with me, when you told me not to face pain alone, that took real strength, the kind that can't be trained or taught." "I was terrified," she admitted. "I know, that's what made it brave." They lapsed into silence again, but this one felt different, charged with possibilities and unspoken promises. Around them, the village continued its healing, but Ino felt as if she and Naruto existed in a bubble apart from the world. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," Naruto said. "Not just the buildings, but the system that lets someone like pain happen in the first place. The world that creates so much suffering that people think destruction is the only answer. That's a big job for one person. Good thing I won't be doing it alone." He smiled at her, and this time it was the warm, genuine expression she'd fallen in love with. "I'll have help, from friends who aren't afraid to stand in the storm." Ino felt her heart skip a beat. "Is that what I am, a friend who stands in storms?" "You're more than that," Naruto said quietly. "You're someone I want to build a better world for." The confession hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Ino stared at him, her mind reeling with the implications of what he just said. "Naruto, I know it's complicated," he said quickly. "I know I'm not the same person I was this morning, and I know that everything's about to change, but I also know that whatever happens next, I want you to be part of it." Instead of answering with words, Ino did something that surprised them both. She leaned over and kissed him, soft, brief, but unmistakably real. When they broke apart, both of them were blushing. "For the record," she said, her voice slightly breathless, "I want to be part of it too." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, two young people who had glimpsed the future and found it worth fighting for. Behind them, hidden in the shadows of the damaged monument, a figure with silver hair watched their interaction with a mixture of pride and concern. "He's growing up faster than any of us expected," Kakashi thought. "The question is whether we can guide that growth, or if we're about to discover what happens when someone with that much power decides they know better than the rest of us." But watching the gentle way Naruto treated Ino, seeing the careful consideration he'd shown even to his enemy, Kakashi felt his fears begin to ease. Maybe, he thought, we don't need to guide him at all. Maybe we just need to trust him. It was a revolutionary thought for someone who had spent his entire life following orders and maintaining systems of control. But then again, this was shaping up to be a revolutionary kind of night. The War Council meeting in the temporary command center felt like stepping into another world. 3 months had passed since Pain's attack, and Konoha bore little resemblance to the village Naruto had known. The rebuilding had been swift and efficient, but more importantly, it had been different. Where before the districts had been segregated by clan and status, now they flowed together organically. The new buildings incorporated defensive positions that could protect civilians, not just ninja assets. Most significantly, the academy had been restructured. Children no longer graduated at 12 to become soldiers, but spent additional years learning diplomacy, logistics, and civilian skills. Small changes, Naruto thought as he reviewed the intelligence reports spread across the table, but important ones. The Akatsuki's movements have become increasingly erratic, Shikamaru reported, his lazy drawl replaced by the crisp professionalism he'd developed since being promoted to Chunin. 8 tails captured, 2 tails missing, and now reports of Sasuke Uchiha working with them. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Despite everything that had happened, despite Naruto's transformation and growing power, Sasuke's defection still felt like an open wound. Any word on his location? Kakashi asked. The Scarecrow Ninja had been named Hokage after Tsunede's injuries during the Pain attack, though everyone knew the real decisions were being made elsewhere. That's where things get interesting, Shikamaru said, glancing meaningfully at Naruto. Intelligence suggests he's not just working with the Akatsuki, he's hunting them. Specifically, he's targeting anyone connected to Itachi's death. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. His secret training with Itachi meant he understood the Uchiha's true loyalties better than anyone in the room. If Sasuke was hunting down Itachi's associates, he's coming for me eventually, Naruto realized, and he doesn't know the truth about his brother. There's something else, Shikamaru continued. The 8 Tails Jinchuriki Killer Bee managed to escape Akatsuki custody, but in the process he encountered someone who matches Naruto's unique energy signature. All eyes turned to Naruto, who kept his expression carefully neutral. What kind of encounter? According to B's report to the Reikage, someone with ocean-deep chakra and wool-like thunder intervened in his fight with Kisame. Shikamaru's sharp eyes studied Naruto's face. Care to explain how your energy signature ended up in Lightning Country? The room fell silent. Naruto could feel the weight of their expectations, their growing suspicions about his mysterious improvements and frequent absences. In the corner, Ino sat quietly, but he could sense her tension through their growing connection. Time to give them some truth, he decided, just not all of it. I've been training with outside instructors, Naruto said simply. People who could teach me things that weren't available in Konoha. What kind of people? Kakashi's voice was carefully controlled, but Naruto could hear the underlying concern. The kind who understand what it's like to carry power that makes you a target. Naruto met his sensei's gaze steadily. The kind who know that the coming war won't be won by conventional ninja techniques. You're talking about the Akatsuki, Yamato said. It wasn't a question. I'm talking about people who want to prevent the apocalypse, Naruto corrected, whether they wear red clouds or not. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Kakashi leaned forward, his visible eye sharp with concern. Naruto, if you're working with... I'm working with anyone who can help me protect this village, Naruto interrupted, letting just a hint of authority creep into his voice, including people you might not approve of. Conqueror's Haki, he thought, allowing the barest whisper of pressure to fill the room. Not enough to be threatening, but sufficient to remind everyone present that he was no longer the child they remembered. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped, papers rustled as nervous hands shifted them, and even the most experienced jounin in the room felt the subtle weight of his presence. The question, Naruto continued in a more normal tone, is whether you trust me to make those decisions. Kakashi studied his former student for a long moment. The boy, no, young man, sitting across from him bore little resemblance to the hyperactive genin who had once painted the Hokage monument. This person radiated quiet confidence and spoke with the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. When did he become someone I look to for leadership instead of guidance? Kakashi wondered. I trust you, Kakashi said finally, but I need to know, are your instructors still active threats to Konoha? They're threats to anyone who wants to destroy the world, Naruto replied. Beyond that, you'll have to trust my judgment. It was a diplomatic non-answer, but the underlying message was clear. I'm operating on a level you don't have clearance for, and that's not going to change. Shikamaru cleared his throat. Speaking of world-destroying threats, we've received intelligence about the real purpose behind the tailed beast captures. He spread a new set of documents across the table, intercepted communications, cryptographic analyses, and most chillingly, detailed schematics of something called the Ten Tails. The Akatsuki isn't just collecting the tailed beasts for their power, Shikamaru explained. They're planning to merge them into a single entity that would make even the Nine Tails look like a house cat. And then Ino asked, speaking for the first time. According to our intelligence, they plan to use it to cast a genjutsu over the entire world, something called the Infinite Tsukiyomi. The room erupted in shocked murmurs, but Naruto remained silent. He'd known about the Moon's Eye plan for months thanks to Itachi's briefings. What surprised him was how accurate Konoha's intelligence had become. Someone's feeding them information, he realized. Someone with access to Akatsuki's inner circle. How reliable is this intelligence? Kakashi asked. Very, came a new voice from the doorway, because I'm the one who provided it. Everyone spun toward the entrance, hands moving instinctively toward weapons. Standing in the shadows of the doorway, his dark cloak making him nearly invisible, was Itachi Uchiha. The reaction was immediate and violent. Kunai appeared in hands, jutsu were halfway formed, and the air itself seemed to crackle with killing intent. But before anyone could attack, Naruto's voice cut through the chaos. Stand down. The words carried such absolute authority that every ninja in the room froze. Not because they'd been given an order, but because something in Naruto's tone made disobedience feel impossible. He's with me, Naruto said simply. Naruto, Kakashi said carefully, that's Itachi Uchiha, he's wanted for. I know exactly who he is and what he's wanted for. Naruto's blue eyes swept the room, noting the positions of every weapon, every potential threat to the man who had become his mentor. I also know that he spent the last several months providing intelligence that has kept this village safe. That's impossible, Yamato protested. He's Akatsuki, He's a double agent who's been working to prevent the very apocalypse we're discussing. Naruto stood slowly, his presence seeming to fill the room. And if anyone in this room tries to harm him, they'll answer to me. The threat hung in the air like a blade, not just words, but a promise backed by power that everyone present had witnessed during the Pain attack. The power to destroy legendary ninja with casual efficiency. Itachi stepped fully into the room, his dark eyes scanning the assembled faces with clinical detachment. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, he said in his characteristic monotone, but recent developments have made discretion impossible. What developments? Kakashi asked, though his hand remained near his weapon pouch. My younger brother has learned the truth about our clan's massacre. Itachi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. And he's decided that the best way to honor my sacrifice is to destroy everything I died to protect. Sasuke, Naruto thought, feeling ice form in his stomach. He knows about the village's orders, about Danzo's involvement. Explain, Kakashi commanded. Sasuke believes that Konoha is responsible for the Uchiha massacre, which is technically correct. What he doesn't understand is that the massacre was necessary to prevent a civil war that would have destroyed the village and killed thousands of innocent people. Itachi's voice remained level, but Naruto could sense the pain beneath his controlled exterior. Now he's allied himself with the real enemy, convinced that revenge against Konoha is more important than preventing global annihilation. And you want us to just trust you? Yamato's voice was heavy with skepticism. I want you to look at the evidence, Itachi replied calmly. He reached into his cloak and withdrew a scroll, setting it on the table with deliberate care. Akatsuki's complete organizational structure, their remaining targets, their backup plans, and most importantly, the location of their leader. Kakashi picked up the scroll with obvious reluctance, his visible eye widening as he read. This is comprehensive. It should be. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to share it. Itachi's gaze shifted to Naruto. That moment has arrived. Why now? Shikamaru asked, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. Because the war is about to begin whether we're prepared or not. Because my brother's misguided quest for revenge is going to hand our enemies exactly what they need to complete their plan. And because, Itachi paused, something almost like emotion flickering across his features. Because I won't live to see the end of this conflict. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Naruto felt his enhanced senses pick up the subtle signs he'd been missing, the slight tremor in Itachi's hands, the carefully controlled breathing, the way he favored his left side. He's dying, Naruto realized with crystal clarity. The disease, the stress of maintaining his cover, the techniques he's been using, it's all catching up to him. How long? Naruto asked quietly. Weeks, perhaps a month if I'm careful. Itachi met his student's eyes, long enough to ensure you're ready for what's coming. Ready for what? To take my place as the hidden guardian of this village, to make the choices that others can't or won't make. Itachi's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. To stand between the light and the darkness, even when no one will thank you for it. The weight of that responsibility settled on Naruto's shoulders like a physical thing. Not just the burden of protecting Konoha, but the obligation to operate outside its systems, to make decisions that preserved the village's soul even when they couldn't preserve its laws. Shadow Cage, he thought, this is what it really means. There's something else, Itachi continued. Intelligence suggests that the final battle will take place within the next 6 months. Madara, the real leader behind all of this, is accelerating his timeline. Madara's dead, Kakashi protested. The man you know as Madara is dead, Itachi corrected. The one pulling Akatsuki strings is someone else wearing his name and his dream of reshaping the world. He spread another set of documents on the table, photographs, intelligence reports, and what looked like medical analyses. His real name is Obito Uchiha, formerly of Team 7. The words hit Kakashi like a kunai to the chest. His visible eye went wide, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the shell-shocked boy who had lost his teammates all those years ago. That's impossible, he whispered. Obito died, I saw him crushed, saw him give me his Sharingan. You saw what you were meant to see, Itachi said gently. He survived barely and was manipulated by the real Madara into believing that this world was beyond saving. Now he leads the Akatsuki in pursuit of a dream that would trap everyone in an eternal illusion. Kakashi sank into his chair, the weight of this revelation visibly crushing him. My student, my teammate, he's been the enemy for years, Itachi confirmed. And he knows all of your techniques, all of your strategies, all of your weaknesses. Which brings us to the real problem, Naruto said, his tactical mind already working through the implications. If Obito knows everything about Team 7 and Sasuke is working with him, then they have access to information about you that even your closest allies don't possess, Itachi finished. Your growth, your new abilities, your unique training methods. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. The enemy they were facing wasn't just powerful, he was intimate with their methods, their personalities, their greatest vulnerabilities. So what do we do? Ino asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Naruto looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people who had become his closest allies. Kakashi, still reeling from the revelation about Obito. Shikamaru, already working through tactical possibilities. Yamato, tense and ready for action, and Ino, who had chosen to stand with him despite having no real understanding of what that meant. These are my people, he realized, the ones I'm fighting to protect. We get ready, he said simply. We train harder than we ever have before. We coordinate with allies we might not normally trust, and we remember that this isn't just about winning a war, it's about preserving the possibility that future generations won't have to fight one. And if we lose, Yamato asked. Naruto's smile carried echoes of another man's unshakable confidence. Then we'll lose standing together, fighting for something worth dying for, but we won't lose. How can you be so certain? Because, Naruto said, his voice carrying the weight of memory and determination, I've seen what the world looks like when good people refuse to give up hope, and that world is worth any sacrifice. As the meeting broke up and the various ninja dispersed to begin their preparations, Ino lingered behind. When the room was empty except for her and Naruto, she moved closer. Are you really that confident? She asked quietly. About winning the war, yes. Naruto's expression grew more serious. About surviving it, that's a different question. Don't talk like that. I have to be realistic, Ino. The power I'm carrying, the responsibilities I'm taking on, there's a cost to all of it, and that cost might be higher than any of us want to pay. Instead of backing away from the implied danger, Ino stepped closer. Then I guess we'd better make sure it's worth it. Wait, you think I'm going to let you face this alone? She smiled, but there was steel underneath the warmth. I told you before, you're stuck with me. That doesn't change just because the stakes got higher. Naruto felt something warm settle in his chest. Not the blazing power of the Nine Tails or the oceanic depth of his Haki, but something simpler and more precious. Hope. In that case, he said, we'd better make sure we're ready for what's coming. Later that night, in a secure training facility beneath the village. The underground chamber was a marvel of engineering, large enough to accommodate major jutsu, reinforced to contain even-tailed beast-level attacks, and warded against every known form of surveillance. Here, in absolute secrecy, Naruto trained with abilities that would have alarmed even his closest allies. Kisame emerged from the shadows, his shark-like grin wider than usual. Heard you had an interesting day, kid. That's one way to put it. Naruto gestured to the training dummies arranged around the chamber, each one reinforced with chakra-conducting metals and designed to withstand attacks that could level buildings. Ready for the advanced session? Always, but first, Kisame's expression grew more serious. Itachi told me about his condition. How are you handling it? Naruto was quiet for a moment, considering the question. How was he handling the knowledge that his mentor, the man who had shaped him into someone capable of standing against legends, was dying? I'm going to make sure his sacrifice matters, he said finally. Good answer. Now show me what you've learned about integrating that fox chakra with your will technique. What followed was a training session that would have terrified anyone who witnessed it. Naruto's golden chakra cloak blazed with veins of black lightning as he practiced the fusion of Conqueror's Haki with the Nine Tails' power. Each strike he threw could have demolished a building, each defensive technique could have stopped attacks from S-rank ninja. But more than the raw power, it was the control that impressed Kisame. The way Naruto could shift seamlessly between overwhelming force and surgical precision, the way he could project his will in ways that bypassed physical defenses entirely. This is what Itachi saw, Kisame thought as he watched his student destroy a practice dummy with a technique that seemed to erase it from existence rather than simply breaking it. Not just power, but the wisdom to use it correctly. Better, Kisame said when Naruto finally paused, but you're still holding back. I'm being careful, this much power will be nothing compared to what you'll face in the real war. Kisame's tone grew serious. Kid, I've fought the strongest ninja of 3 generations. I've seen techniques that could reshape landscapes and jutsu that could stop time itself. What's coming isn't going to give you the luxury of restraint. Meaning you need to stop thinking like someone who's trying not to break things and start thinking like someone who's trying to save them. Kisame gestured to the elaborate training facility around them. All of this, the secrecy, the careful power management, the political dancing, it ends when the real fighting starts. When that happens, you're going to have to trust that your strength is worth the risk of using it. Naruto absorbed this advice, feeling its truth resonate with Shanks' memories. There had been times when the red-haired emperor had held back, tried to solve problems with minimal force. And there had been times when that restraint had cost lives that could have been saved with decisive action. Balance, he thought, know when to be gentle and when to be overwhelming. There's something else, Kisame continued, your girlfriend. Ino isn't, Naruto began, then stopped. Were they dating? They'd kissed, spent countless hours together, and she'd made it clear she intended to stand with him regardless of the danger. What about her? She's strong, but she's not strong enough for what's coming, and she's going to try to keep up with you anyway because that's the kind of person she is. Kisame's expression was unusually serious. You need to decide how far you're willing to go to protect her because that decision is going to define everything else you do. The observation hit like a physical blow. Naruto had been so focused on growing stronger, on preparing for the larger conflicts ahead, that he'd avoided thinking about the personal costs. Ino could die, he realized, not because she's weak, but because she's brave enough to stand beside someone who draws the attention of gods and monsters. "What would you do?" he asked. "Me? I'd lock her up somewhere safe and deal with her being furious at me for the rest of my life." Kisame's grin returned. "But I'm not someone who believes in freedom the way you do. You'll have to find your own answer." As they resumed training, Naruto found himself thinking about Ino's determined face, her refusal to be left behind, her absolute certainty that she belonged at his side. "She has the right to choose," he decided, "even if that choice terrifies me." But that didn't mean he couldn't do everything in his power to ensure she survived that choice. The training session that followed was unlike anything he'd attempted before, not just building his own power, but developing techniques that could protect others. Ways to extend his conqueror's Haki to shield allies, methods of using the Nine Tails chakra to enhance their abilities rather than just his own. If she's going to stand in the storm, he thought as golden energy swirled around practice targets in protective barriers, then I'll make sure she has the best armor I can provide. Meanwhile, in a hidden base far from Konoha, the Nine Tails Jinchuriki continues to exceed expectations, Obito reported to the figure seated in the shadows. Intelligence suggests he's developed abilities that aren't documented in any ninja manual. "Abilities or memories?" the ancient voice asked. "There are forces in this world older than the hidden villages, powers that transcend the simple chakra techniques these children play with." "You think he's tapped into something like that?" "I think he's becoming exactly what we need him to become, powerful enough to be worth corrupting, influential enough that his fall will shatter the hopes of everyone who follows him." Madara's true form shifted in the darkness. "Continue to monitor him, and ensure that when the time comes for the final gambit, he'll be emotionally compromised enough to make the wrong choice. And if he proves incorruptible, then we'll discover whether his principles matter more to him than the lives of his precious people." The ancient Uchiha's laughter echoed through the chamber like the sound of breaking dreams. "Let him grow strong," Madara thought. "Let him gather allies and develop techniques that no one has seen before. In the end, it will only make his inevitable fall more devastating to those who believed in him." The war was coming, and everyone was preparing for it in their own way. The battlefield stretched beyond the horizon, a wasteland of shattered earth and twisted metal where the Fourth Great Ninja War had reached its climax. The sky burned with unnatural colors, crimson and gold swirling together like the end of the world made manifest. At the center of it all stood Kaguya Otsutsuki, the progenitor of chakra, the mother of all shinobi arts. Her pale skin seemed to glow with inner light, and her bone-white horns cast shadows that moved independently of the sun. Around her, reality itself bent and warped as she casually rewrote the laws of physics with each gesture. "Insects," she said, her voice carrying the weight of eons. "You scurry about with your borrowed power, never understanding that everything you possess came from me originally." The allied shinobi forces had given everything they had. Thousands lay unconscious or worse, drained by techniques that operated on a level beyond conventional ninja arts. Even the legendary figures, the resurrected Hokage, the remaining Jinchuriki, the most elite jounin from every village, had been swept aside like leaves in a hurricane. Only a handful remained standing. Naruto crouched behind the shattered remains of what had once been a mountain, his enhanced senses cataloging the desperate situation. Sasuke was 50 meters to his left, the eternal Mangekyo sharing and spinning frantically as he tried to find some weakness in their impossible opponent. Sakura worked frantically over Kakashi's still form, her medical ninjutsu barely keeping their sensei alive after his last desperate attack. And scattered across the battlefield, the people he'd sworn to protect lay broken and bleeding. "This isn't working," Naruto thought grimly. "Everything we've tried, every technique, every strategy, she counters it before we can even complete it." The truth was bitter but unavoidable. They were fighting someone who existed on a fundamentally different level. Kaguya wasn't just stronger than them, she was more real, as if their techniques were shadows while hers had substance. "You cannot defeat me," Kaguya continued, her pale eyes sweeping the battlefield with casual contempt. "I am the origin of all chakra, the source of every technique you've ever learned. Fighting me is like trying to drown the ocean." A sound made Naruto look up, not the crash of another devastating attack, but something smaller, more personal, a soft gasp of pain. Ino lay 30 meters away, her purple outfit torn and bloody, one arm bent at an angle that made Naruto's stomach clench. She was trying to sit up, trying to rejoin the battle despite injuries that would have killed most people. She's dying, he realized with crystal clarity. They're all dying, and I'm not strong enough to save them. The thought hit him like a physical blow. All of his training, all of his secret techniques, all of the power he'd accumulated through months of preparation, none of it mattered. He was going to watch the people he cared about die because he hadn't been strong enough when it counted. Just like before, whispered a voice in his mind that sounded like his own, but older, just like when Ace. No, Naruto cut off the memory before it could fully form. That was Shanks's pain, Shanks's failure. But the emotion behind it, the crushing weight of not being strong enough to protect what mattered most, that was universal. Naruto, Sasuke's voice was strained, urgent. She's preparing something, another dimension-shifting technique. Naruto's enhanced senses confirmed it. The space around Kaguya was beginning to warp, preparing to transport them to another of her controlled dimensions where their defeat would be even more certain. Last chance, he thought, whatever I'm going to do, it has to be now. But what could he do? He'd already pushed his Conqueror's Haki to its limits, already integrated it with the Nine Tails chakra in ways that should have been impossible. He'd used every technique Itachi had taught him, every strategy Kisame had drilled into him. It wasn't enough. A soft sound reached his ears, Ino's voice, barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly across the devastated battlefield. Naruto's don't give up. He turned toward her, seeing the way she struggled to keep her eyes open, the way her hand reached toward him despite the obvious agony of movement. I believed in you. And then she did something that stopped his heart. She tried to stand. Despite her injuries, despite the overwhelming power of their enemy, despite the hopelessness of their situation, Ino Yamanaka pushed herself to her feet. Blood ran down her face from a head wound, her left arm hung useless at her side, and every breath was obviously agony. But she stood. Ino, don't, Naruto called out. You're hurt, you can't. Can't what? She asked, her voice gaining strength as she found her balance. Can't stand with the person I love, can't fight for the world we're trying to build. The person I love. The words hit him like lightning, not because they were unexpected, but because of when she chose to say them. Not in a quiet moment of safety, not as a confession whispered in the dark, but here, at the end of everything, as a declaration of what she was willing to die for. I'm not strong enough to make a difference, she continued, taking a painful step toward Kaguya despite the obvious futility of the gesture. But I'm strong enough to choose, strong enough to stand where I belong. And where is that? Kaguya asked, her voice carrying only mild curiosity as she regarded the injured girl who dared to approach her. Beside him, Ino said simply, always beside him. That's when Naruto understood. It wasn't about being strong enough, it had never been about being strong enough. Strength, real strength, wasn't measured in the force of your attacks or the scope of your techniques. It was measured in what you were willing to stand for when everything else fell away. Shanks knew that, Naruto realized as memories flooded through him. That's why his crew followed him. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was willing to bear any burden to protect what mattered to him. The power that had been building inside him for months suddenly shifted, crystallized, became something new. Not just the fusion of Conqueror's Haki and Nine Tails chakra, but something deeper, the manifestation of absolute will backed by absolute love. When Naruto stood, the air around him began to change. Golden chakra swirled outward, but this time it carried veins of black lightning that seemed to crack reality itself. The pressure of his Conqueror's Haki didn't just suppress enemies, it inspired allies, filling them with the certainty that victory was possible. But more than that, something else was happening. The Sage of Six Paths power that had been dormant within him since the war began suddenly awakened, drawn out by the intensity of his emotional breakthrough. This is it, he thought, as power unlike anything he'd ever experienced flooded through his system. This is what Itachi meant about not holding back. The transformation was visible from across the battlefield. Where before Naruto had been a powerful ninja with unusual abilities, now he blazed like a miniature sun. The golden chakra that surrounded him wasn't just energy, it was solidified will, determination made manifest. The black lightning that crackled through it carried the weight of absolute authority, the power to impose his vision of reality on the world itself. And underneath it all, supporting and amplifying everything else, was the Sage of Six Paths mode, the power of the founder of all ninja arts, awakened by someone who finally understood what true strength really meant. Impossible, Kaguya whispered, her pale eyes widening as she felt the magnitude of what was happening. That power, it's not just chakra, it's something else entirely. It's will, Naruto said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone present. The will to protect what matters most, no matter the cost. When he moved, it wasn't with the desperate speed of someone trying to win a fight. It was with the inexorable advance of someone who had already decided how the story would end. Kaguya struck first, her all-killing ash bones technique launching projectiles that could disintegrate anything they touched. But Naruto didn't dodge, he simply willed them not to hit him, and reality bent to accommodate that decision. Her dimensional shift technique activated, trying to transport him to a dimension of lava where his enhanced abilities would be meaningless. But Naruto's power operated on a level beyond physical techniques. It was the force of narrative itself, the certainty that heroes protected what they loved. The dimension cracked. "What are you?" Kaguya demanded, genuine alarm entering her voice for the first time. "I'm someone who remembers what it means to be free," Naruto replied, his enhanced state allowing him to move between her attacks like water flowing around stones. And freedom isn't something you can take away or control or corrupt. His counterattack wasn't a technique in any conventional sense. It was the projection of his absolute refusal to let anyone harm the people he protected. The force of that determination, enhanced by Sage of Six Paths mode and focused through Conqueror's Haki, hit Kaguya like a blow from the concept of justice itself. She staggered, her perfect composure cracking for the first time. "You're fighting the wrong battle," Naruto continued, pressing his advantage. "You think this is about power, about who's stronger or who has the better techniques, but it's not." Another strike, this one carrying the weight of every lesson Itachi had taught him about protecting what mattered most. Kaguya tried to counter, but her attacks seemed to slide off him like water off glass. "It's about choice," he said, "about the decision to stand up and fight for something bigger than yourself, even when the odds are impossible." The realization hit Kaguya like a physical blow, not that Naruto was stronger than her, but that he was operating according to different rules entirely. Where she drew power from fear and control, he drew it from love and sacrifice. Where she imposed her will through domination, he inspired others to choose freely. And in a universe where will shaped reality, that difference was everything. "You would sacrifice yourself for them?" she asked, gesturing toward the broken forms of his friends and allies. "Without hesitation," Naruto replied, "but more than that, I'd live for them. I'd become someone worthy of their faith." The final exchange happened in the space between heartbeats. Kaguya poured everything she had into one last desperate attack, a technique that would have rewritten the fundamental forces of existence itself. Naruto met it with something simpler and infinitely more powerful, the absolute certainty that love was stronger than fear, that hope was more real than despair, that the people willing to stand together could overcome any force that stood alone. The collision of these philosophies made manifest shook the world to its foundations. Mountains crumbled, oceans boiled, and the sky itself cracked like glass. When the light faded, Kaguya lay unconscious in a crater of her own making, her immense power finally exhausted. And standing over her, his golden aura slowly fading but his presence somehow even more impressive, was Naruto Uzumaki. He looked exactly like the boy who had once painted the Hokage monument as a prank. He also looked like someone who could reshape the world with a thought. "Is it over?" Sasuke asked, limping over to where Naruto stood. "This part is," Naruto replied. He was exhausted, the fusion of all his abilities had pushed him beyond his limits, but his voice still carried that note of absolute certainty. "But we still have work to do." "What kind of work?" Naruto looked out over the battlefield where the survivors were beginning to tend to the wounded and assess the damage. In the distance, he could see Ino being helped to her feet by Sakura, both of them looking battered but alive. "The kind that makes sure something like this never happens again," he said quietly. "The kind that builds a world where people don't have to become monsters to feel safe." Sasuke studied his former teammate's profile, nodding the way Naruto's presence seemed to inspire hope in everyone around him despite the devastation they'd witnessed. "When did he become someone I look up to?" Sasuke wondered. "When did the dead last become the person I want to follow?" But even as he asked the question, he knew the answer. It had been a gradual process, one moment of selfless courage building on another, until the boy who had once desperately sought recognition had become someone who naturally commanded respect. "What about us?" Sasuke asked. "What about our rivalry?" Naruto smiled, not the bright, manic grin of his childhood, but something deeper and more genuine. "We're going to settle that properly," he said. "One last time with everything on the table, and Then we're going to work together to build something worth protecting." As the immediate crisis began to fade and the work of healing began, Naruto felt a familiar presence at his side. Ino had managed to break away from Sakura's medical attention long enough to stand with him, her injured arm in a makeshift sling, but her eyes bright with something that transcended physical pain. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For showing me what it really means to be brave." She leaned against him just slightly, and he could feel the warmth of her presence through his exhaustion. "For being someone worth standing beside." "You saved me," Naruto said, his voice soft with wonder. "When you stood up, when you said you loved me, that's when I finally understood what I was really fighting for." "And what was that?" "The right to choose," he replied. "The freedom to stand up and say, this is what I believe in, and have that mean something. The chance to build a world where people like you can make choices like that without having to die for them." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the ninja world began the long process of healing from its greatest crisis. Around them, enemies became allies, old grudges were set aside in favor of cooperation, and the first tentative steps toward something better began to take shape. But even as hope bloomed across the battlefield, both of them knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. Kaguya had been defeated, but the systems that had made her rise possible remained. The hidden village structure that pitted nation against nation, the cycle of revenge that turned victims into victimizers, the fear that made people choose security over freedom, all of that still existed. One crisis at a time, Naruto thought. First we heal, then we rebuild, then we make sure it lasts. In the distance, a figure in a white cloak watched the proceedings with calculating eyes. Zetsu had survived the final battle, and while his master's plan had failed, that didn't mean all hope was lost. The Jinchuriki is powerful, the ancient being mused, but power without wisdom is just another kind of weakness. And everyone has someone they care about more than principles. The war was over, but the peace that followed would bring its own challenges. And in that peace, heroes would discover whether their strength was enough to protect not just lives, but the ideals that made those lives worth living. The Valley of the End looked exactly as it had generations ago, two massive statues facing each other across a turbulent waterfall, frozen in eternal combat. But where once Madara and Hashirama had fought to determine the future of the ninja world, now their successors stood ready to write the final chapter of a different kind of war. Naruto stood atop Hashirama's head, the morning sun casting long shadows across his face. 3 weeks had passed since Kaguya's defeat, 3 weeks of rebuilding and planning and trying to figure out what came next. But this confrontation had always been inevitable. Across the valley, Sasuke waited on Madara's statue, his eternal Mangekyou sharing an already active. The sight of those spinning Tamos sent a pang through Naruto's chest, not fear, but something deeper. The knowledge that after everything they'd been through, it had come down to this. One last battle, Naruto thought, to settle everything between us. "You came," Sasuke called across the water, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would be smart enough to stay away." Sasuke's tone was conversational, but Naruto's enhanced senses caught the tension underneath. "This doesn't have to involve you, Naruto. My quarrel is with the system, not with you personally." "Your quarrel is with Konoha," Naruto corrected. "With the village I've sworn to protect. That makes it involve me whether I want it to or not." Sasuke was quiet for a moment, his Sharingan tracking minute changes in Naruto's posture, cataloging potential threats and opportunities. What he saw made something twist in his chest. He's different, Sasuke realized, not just stronger, but settled, like he's finally figured out who he's supposed to be. You've grown, Sasuke said finally. So have you? Naruto's blue eyes met red ones across the divide. The question is whether we've grown in the same direction. We haven't. Sasuke's hand moved to the sword at his side, not Kusanagi, but a blade forged from his own chakra and will. I've seen the truth, Naruto. About Itachi, about the Uchiha massacre, about the rot at the heart of every hidden village. I know about Itachi, Naruto said quietly. I know what he sacrificed and I know why he did it. The admission hit Sasuke like a physical blow. You knew. For months, he told me himself during our training sessions. Training sessions? Sasuke felt something crack inside his chest, not surprise, but a deeper sense of betrayal. He trained you, his brother's rival, the Jinchuriki he was supposed to capture, and he chose to train you instead. Because he saw what I could become, what we both could become if we chose differently than our predecessors. Naruto gestured to the statues beneath their feet. Madara and Hashirama fought for their vision of the future. One wanted control through strength, the other wanted peace through understanding, but they both failed. Because understanding is weakness, Sasuke snarled. Because peace built on pretty words and good intentions crumbles the moment someone decides to take what they want by force. Is that what you believe? That strength is the only truth that matters. It's what I've learned. Sasuke's chakra began to flare, purple energy wrapping around him like armor. Every tragedy, every betrayal, every moment of suffering, it all comes down to the same thing. The strong decide what happens to the weak. Then you've learned the wrong lesson. The words carried such absolute certainty that Sasuke actually paused. In the months since Itachi's death, since learning the truth about his clan's massacre, he'd built his worldview around a single principle. Power was the only currency that mattered. But Naruto spoke as if that principle was not just wrong, but fundamentally misguided. Enlighten me then, Sasuke said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What great wisdom did my brother share with you that he never shared with me? That true strength isn't about imposing your will on others, Naruto replied. It's about inspiring them to choose freely what you would have forced them to accept. Philosophy? Sasuke's Susanoo began to manifest around him, a skeletal framework of purple energy that grew more solid with each passing second. Pretty words that mean nothing when someone's trying to kill everyone you care about. They meant something to Itachi. Itachi was a fool, the words erupted from Sasuke with years of suppressed pain and anger. He believed in a system that ordered the slaughter of his own family. He died protecting people who would have destroyed him the moment he outlived his usefulness. He died protecting the possibility that future generations wouldn't have to make the same choices he did. Naruto's own power began to rise, golden chakra swirling around him like liquid sunlight. He died believing that we could build something better. There is nothing better. Sasuke's completed Susanoo towered over the valley, a perfect warrior of chakra and will. There are only predators and prey, rulers and ruled, those who take and those who get taken from. Is that what you think I am? Naruto asked, his voice still calm despite the overwhelming display of power facing him. A predator, someone who takes what he wants by force. I think you're someone who's been lying to himself about what power really means. Sasuke drew his sword, the blade crackling with black flames that seemed to burn reality itself. But don't worry, I'm going to cure you of that delusion. The attack came without further warning. Sasuke's Susanoo moved with impossible speed for something so large, its massive sword sweeping toward Naruto in an arc that would have cleaved a mountain in half. But Naruto was no longer there. Observation Haki, Shanks's memories whispered. See the attack before it's made, be somewhere else before it arrives. Naruto reappeared behind Sasuke's construct, his hand glowing with the fusion of Rasengan and Conqueror's Haki. The impact sent shockwaves through the valley, cracking both statues and sending geysers of water erupting from the falls. Sasuke spun to face him, Amaterasu flames lashing out like black whips. But where once those flames had been unavoidable, now they simply weren't. Naruto moved through them like they were suggestions rather than attacks, his enhanced state allowing him to exist partially outside the normal flow of cause and effect. Impossible, Sasuke breathed. Amaterasu can't be dodged. By someone operating under normal rules, Naruto agreed, but I stopped being normal a long time ago. His counterattack was devastating in its simplicity. No complex jutsu, no elaborate combinations, just raw will made manifest, striking with the force of absolute certainty. Sasuke's Susanoo cracked under the impact, hairline fractures spreading through the chakra construct like a breaking mirror. He's not just stronger, Sasuke realized with growing alarm. He's operating on a completely different level. What are you? He demanded, pouring more chakra into his Susanoo to repair the damage. I'm someone who remembers what it means to protect something bigger than myself, Naruto replied. I'm someone who refuses to let fear and anger define what's possible. The battle that followed shook the valley to its foundations. Sasuke unleashed every technique he'd mastered, Indra's arrow, perfect Susanoo, space-time manipulation that bent reality around his attacks. Each one was performed with flawless precision, backed by power that could have devastated entire armies. But Naruto met each assault with something that transcended technique. His Sage of Six Paths mode combined with Conqueror's Haki and Ninetales chakra created a fusion of abilities that seemed to rewrite the rules of combat itself. When Sasuke struck with perfect technique, Naruto responded with perfect will. When Sasuke bent space and time, Naruto simply refused to be bound by conventional physics. It's like fighting a force of nature, Sasuke thought, as another devastating combination was casually deflected. No, like fighting a principle made flesh. And that's when he understood what he was really facing. Not just Naruto Uzumaki, not just the Ninetales Jinchuriki, but something else entirely. Someone who had integrated power and purpose so completely that they became indistinguishable. This is what Itachi saw, Sasuke realized. This is why he chose him over me. The realization should have filled him with rage. Instead, it brought something unexpected, relief. For the first time since his family's death, Sasuke was facing someone he couldn't defeat through superior skill or greater power. Someone who forced him to confront the possibility that his worldview might be wrong. You want to know what I really learned from Itachi? Naruto said as they broke apart after another exchange. He wasn't even breathing hard while Sasuke could feel his chakra reserves beginning to strain. I learned that the strongest person in the room isn't the one who can beat everyone else. It's the one who makes everyone else stronger just by being there. Pretty sentiment, Sasuke panted, but strength is still strength and I'm not done yet. What happened next surprised them both. Instead of launching another attack, Sasuke stopped. His Susanoo faded, his weapons lowered, and for the first time since the battle began, he looked directly at Naruto without the filter of technique and combat. Why? He asked, and his voice carried years of confused pain. Why did he choose you? Why did my brother, the person I've spent my entire life trying to surpass, decide that you were worth saving and I wasn't? The question hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Naruto could have answered with platitudes, could have tried to spare Sasuke's feelings with comfortable lies. Instead, he chose honesty. Because you were trying to become him, Naruto said quietly, and I was trying to become myself. Explain. Every technique you learned, every goal you set, every choice you made, it was all about living up to Itachi's example. You wanted to be as strong as him, as skilled as him, as perfect as him. Naruto's voice was gentle but unwavering. But he didn't need another Itachi. He needed someone who could do what he couldn't. Which was live free. The words carried echoes of another man's philosophy. Another time when someone had understood that true strength came from the ability to choose your own path. Itachi spent his entire life serving systems he didn't believe in, making choices that destroyed him inside, all because he thought duty was more important than happiness. He didn't want that for you. Sasuke was quiet for a long moment, his sharing and spinning as he processed this revelation. Then why didn't he tell me? Why did he let me believe that strength was everything? Because he was dying, Naruto said simply. Because he ran out of time to teach you what he'd learned too late to save himself. The truth of it hit Sasuke like a physical blow. All of his rage, all of his pursuit of power, all of his certainty that the world was divided into predators and prey, it had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Itachi hadn't wanted him to become stronger, he'd wanted him to become free. I've been wrong, Sasuke whispered, the words seeming to tear themselves from his throat. About everything, about strength, about Itachi, about you. Not wrong, Naruto corrected, just incomplete. You saw part of the truth that power matters, that the strong do shape the world, but you missed the most important part. Which is? The strong have a choice about how they use that power. They can use it to control others, or they can use it to protect the freedom to choose. Naruto smiled, and for the first time since childhood, it was the bright, genuine expression Sasuke remembered. Itachi chose protection, and he hoped we'd be strong enough to choose better than he did. Sasuke felt something break inside his chest, not painfully, but like a dam finally giving way to let a river flow free. All the anger, all the need for revenge, all the crushing weight of trying to live up to an impossible standard. It simply drained away, leaving behind something he'd almost forgotten he possessed. Hope. What now? He asked. I've committed crimes against multiple villages. I've allied with people who wanted to destroy the world. He gestured helplessly at the devastation around them. I've done things that can't be undone. Now you choose what comes next, Naruto said. You can keep trying to pay for the past, or you can start building a future worth having. And if I choose to build, then you won't be doing it alone. Naruto extended his hand toward his former teammate, rival, and friend. It was the same gesture he'd made to Nagato, the same offer of partnership and possibility. But this time it meant more. This was Sasuke, the person who had driven him to become stronger, the rival who had pushed him to exceed his own limits, the friend whose approval he'd craved even when it seemed impossible to earn. The person I always hoped would choose to stand with me rather than against me. Sasuke stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Taking it would mean accepting that his worldview had been wrong, that the path he'd chosen had led nowhere, that everything he'd done in the name of strength had actually made him weaker. It would also mean accepting the possibility that there was another way, that power and freedom weren't mutually exclusive, that someone could be strong enough to protect what they loved without becoming someone they hated. What would Itachi want me to do? He wondered. But even as he asked the question, he knew the answer. Itachi had spent his last years hopping for exactly this moment, the moment when his little brother finally understood that strength without love was just another form of weakness. Slowly, Sasuke reached out and took Naruto's hand. The contact sent a shock through both of them, not chakra, but something deeper. Understanding, perhaps, or simply the recognition that they were no longer the children who had competed for their sensei's attention. Partners, Naruto asked. Partners, Sasuke agreed, but I have one condition. Name it. When this is over, when we've built whatever it is we're going to build, I want one more fight, a real one with everything on the table, not to prove who's stronger, but just, he struggled for words, just to see how far we've both come. Naruto's grin could have lit up the valley. Deals, but you should know I'm going to win. We'll see about that. As they stood together atop the statues of their predecessors, both young men felt the weight of history settling around them. Madara and Hashirama had fought here for their vision of the future, and their conflict had shaped the ninja world for generations. Now their inheritors were choosing a different path, not the dominance of one vision over another, but the collaboration of two complementary strengths. This is what Itachi dreamed of, Naruto thought. This is what he died hoping we'd achieve. So what's the plan? Sasuke asked. How do we build this better world you're always talking about? Carefully, Naruto replied, and probably from the shadows, the kind of changes we're talking about. They're not the kind that can be imposed from above. Shadow Cage, Sasuke mused. I like the sound of that. Good, because I'm going to need help with the politics, all this leadership stuff. Naruto scratched the back of his head in a gesture that reminded Sasuke powerfully of their academy days. I'm better with the punching. Leave the politics to me, Sasuke said. I've had a lot of practice at being someone people are afraid to argue with. They spent the rest of the morning talking, not about techniques or power or grand strategies, but about smaller things, about the friends they'd lost and the ones they'd found, about the mistakes they'd made and the lessons they'd learned, about the future they wanted to build and the obstacles they'd have to overcome. It was the first real conversation they'd had since they were 12 years old. When the sun reached its zenith, they began the journey back to Konoha, not as enemies finally reconciled, but as partners ready to begin the work of reshaping the world. Behind them, the Valley of the End stood empty except for the eternal statues and the memory of a battle that had ended not in victory or defeat, but in understanding. Later that evening in Konoha, the celebration was subdued but genuine. Word of Sasuke's return and, more importantly, his change of heart had spread through the village like wildfire. There were still those who viewed him with suspicion, who remembered his crimes and questioned whether forgiveness was possible. But there were also those who saw something else, the possibility that even the most lost could find their way back to the light. Ino found Naruto on the roof of the rebuilt Hokage Tower, staring out over the village they'd both fought to protect. The reconstruction was nearly complete, but more than that, there was something different about the atmosphere. People moved with more purpose, cooperation crossed clan lines more easily, and the barriers between ninja and civilian had begun to blur. Hope, she realized, the whole village feels hopeful. How did it go? She asked, settling beside him. Better than I expected, worse than I hoped. Naruto's smile was tired but genuine. He's coming around. It'll take time, but he's choosing to heal instead of fester. And you, how are you handling all this? Naruto considered the question. How was he handling the knowledge that everything was about to change, that the informal leadership he'd been developing would soon need to become something more structured and permanent? Terrified, he admitted, and excited, and guilty that I'm excited about something that came from so much pain. That's called being human, Ino said gently. Being happy that good things can come from bad situations doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make me a good one either. No, but your actions do. The choices you make every day, the people you protect, the sacrifices you're willing to make, that's what makes you good. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the lights of the village twinkle to life as darkness fell. Somewhere below, their friends were beginning new lives shaped by the events of the past months. Somewhere beyond the village walls, other settlements were grappling with the implications of a world where the old rules no longer applied. And somewhere in the distance, the future waited to be built. Naruto, Ino said softly, what happens to us when you and Sasuke start working as Shadow Cage, when you're operating outside normal chains of command? Where does that leave people like me? It was the question he'd been dreading. The answer would define not just their relationship, but the kind of leader he was going to become. It leaves you with a choice, he said finally. You can have a normal life, tune in missions, maybe join in rank eventually, a peaceful career in a village that's finally starting to live up to its ideals. Or you can come with me into the shadows, help build something that's never existed before. Except that you'll never get credit for the good you do, never be recognized for the sacrifices you make, never have the certainty that what you're building will last. Ino was quiet for so long that Naruto began to worry he'd asked too much. The life of a Shadow Cage would be dangerous, uncertain, and ultimately thankless. He had no right to ask someone he cared about to share that burden. Will I be able to help people? She asked finally. More than you can imagine. Will I be working towards something I believe in? Something we both believe in? Will I be beside you? Always. Ino smiled, and in that expression, Naruto saw the same courage that had driven her to stand against pain, the same determination that had helped him find his true strength. Then what are we waiting for? She asked. Let's go build a better world. As the night deepened around them, two young people sat together and planned the future of the ninja world. Their conversation was quiet, practical, filled with the mundane details of revolution. But underneath those details was something that would have made Shanks proud, the absolute certainty that freedom was worth any price and that together they were strong enough to pay it. 5 years had passed since the Valley of the End, and the ninja world barely resembled the one that had emerged from the Fourth Great War. From his vantage point atop the newly constructed Tower of Shadows, built into the mountains overlooking Konoha but separate from its formal governance, Naruto watched the morning sun illuminate a landscape of profound change. The hidden village system still existed, but it had been fundamentally transformed. Where once villages had been isolated military fortresses, now they functioned as interconnected city-states with open borders and shared resources. The rigid hierarchy that had once separated ninja from civilian had given way to a more fluid system, where people chose their paths based on aptitude and interest rather than birth circumstances. Most importantly, children no longer became soldiers at 12. The morning reports, Sasuke said, materializing from the shadows with a stack of scrolls. His partner moved with the same fluid grace he'd always possessed, but now it carried purpose rather than anger. The eternal Mangekyou Sharingan had been replaced by normal dark eyes. He'd learned to reserve his enhanced vision for when it was truly needed. Anything urgent? Naruto asked, accepting the intelligence summaries. 3 items of note. First, the economic integration protocols are ahead of schedule. Trade between former enemy villages has increased 40% in the last quarter alone. Good, what else? Intelligence suggests that remnants of Danzo's root organization are attempting to re-establish themselves in Wave Country. They're calling themselves the Foundation and preaching a return to the old ways. Naruto's expression darkened slightly. Root had been officially disbanded years ago, but its ideology, that peace required the sacrifice of individual freedom, had proven harder to eliminate than its organizational structure. Response. Already in motion, our agents in Wave have identified the leadership structure and are preparing targeted interventions, non-lethal where possible, but, Sasuke shrugged, some people choose not to accept that the world has changed. And the third item. Sasuke's expression grew more serious. Kakashi wants to see us, official meeting in the Hokage's office. He specifically requested that we attend in our capacity as concerned citizens rather than as other things. The careful phrasing brought a slight smile to Naruto's face. Even after 5 years, the relationship between the Shadow Cage system and conventional village leadership required delicate navigation. Officially, Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha were respected, but retired ninja who had chosen to live quietly outside the village structure. Unofficially, everyone knew they were the invisible force that had prevented at least 3 potential wars and eliminated numerous threats before they could develop into crises. Balance, Naruto thought, give the official system enough space to function, but be ready to act when it can't handle what's needed. Any idea what he wants to discuss? I suspect it's related to the upcoming Cage Summit. Intelligence suggests several village leaders are growing, uncomfortable with the pace of change. Naruto absorbed this information while reviewing the morning's reports. The transformation of the ninja world hadn't been without resistance. For every village that embraced the new paradigm, there was another that clung to traditional isolation. For every leader who understood that cooperation made everyone stronger, there was another who saw change as weakness. Growing pains, he reminded himself, change this fundamental was never going to be smooth. We should probably get moving, he said, setting aside the scrolls. No point in keeping the Hokage waiting. As they prepared to leave, Ino emerged from the tower's communication center, her purple outfit replaced by the dark gray that had become the unofficial uniform of Shadow Cage operatives. She'd grown into her role over the past 5 years, developing from a skilled kunoichi into something entirely new, a coordinator and strategist capable of managing operations across multiple continents simultaneously. Before you go, she said, handing Naruto a sealed message. Priority communication from our contact in Stone. The situation with their Tsuchikage is escalating. Naruto scanned the coded report, his expression growing grimmer with each line. He's planning to withdraw from the trade agreements. Worse, intelligence suggests he's been in contact with several other traditional leaders about forming a pure ninja alliance, basically a return to the hidden village system with enhanced isolationist policies. How many villages? Potentially 5 or 6, nothing confirmed yet, but if they coordinate their withdrawal from the integration protocols. It could cascade, Sasuke finished. Fear and uncertainty make people retreat to what they know, even when what they know doesn't work. Naruto felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. This was the challenge he'd known would come eventually, the moment when the idealistic vision of cooperation would clash with the practical reality of human nature. Some people would always choose the familiar cage over unfamiliar freedom. Options, he asked. We could intervene directly, Ino suggested. Selective pressure on the leaders, demonstration of what happens when cooperation breaks down. Too heavy-handed, Sasuke countered. If we start forcing compliance, we become the thing we're trying to replace, just another form of authoritarian control. Then what do you suggest? We remind them why they chose cooperation in the first place, Naruto said quietly. We show them what they have to lose. An hour later in the Hokage's office. Kakashi looked older than his years, the weight of leadership having etched new lines around his visible eye. But there was something else in his expression, not just fatigue, but a kind of frustrated concern that Naruto recognized from their old team 7 days. "Thank you for coming," Kakashi said as they settled into chairs around his desk. "I assume you've heard about the potential alliance against the integration protocols." "We're aware," Sasuke confirmed. "Our question is whether this is a political consultation or a request for operational support." "Both potentially." Kakashi pulled out a map covered in colored pins, red for villages showing isolationist tendencies, green for those fully committed to integration, yellow for those still deciding. The distribution was uncomfortably even. The Cage Summit is in 3 weeks. If the isolationist faction presents a united front, they could force a rollback of everything we've accomplished. "And if they succeed?" Ino asked. "We're back to the old system within 5 years. Hidden villages as military fortresses, children trained as soldiers, resources hoarded instead of shared." Kakashi's voice carried the weight of someone who remembered exactly how that system had functioned. "Everything we've built disappears." Naruto studied the map, his enhanced senses picking up the tension radiating from everyone in the room. This wasn't just about policy. It was about the fundamental question of what kind of world they wanted to leave for the next generation. "What kind of support are you requesting?" he asked. "Intelligence, primarily, early warning if the alliance moves toward active resistance. And," Kakashi hesitated, "if it comes to it, the knowledge that there are people willing to preserve what we've built even if the official systems fail." He's asking us to be prepared for civil war, Naruto realized, not between villages, but between philosophies. "Understood," Sasuke said, "but I have to ask, have you considered the possibility that some resistance might be justified?" Kakashi's eye narrowed. "Explain." "Change this rapid and comprehensive creates instability. People get scared, they make bad decisions, and sometimes those bad decisions create real problems." Sasuke leaned forward. "What if some of these leaders aren't just being stubborn? What if they're seeing genuine issues that we've been too focused on the big picture to notice?" It was a fair point, and one that spoke to the growth Sasuke had undergone. The young man who had once seen everything in terms of absolute right and wrong now understood the value of considering multiple perspectives. "Which is why we need to be very careful about how we respond," Naruto said. "Heavy-handed tactics will only prove their point about authoritarian control, but complete passivity might allow genuinely dangerous elements to gain momentum." "So what do you recommend?" Naruto was quiet for a moment, thinking through the options. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had learned to balance idealism with pragmatism. "We attend the Cage Summit. Not officially, we're still retired after all, but close enough to observe and respond if necessary. We let the political process play out naturally, but we're ready to intervene if anyone tries to force their position through violence or coercion. And if the vote goes against integration, then we respect the democratic process and work within whatever system emerges, but we also make it clear that certain lines won't be crossed." Naruto's blue eyes took on a harder edge. "If anyone tries to return to the practice of child soldiers, if anyone attempts to restart the cycle of village versus village warfare, if anyone threatens the basic freedoms we've established, then we act. Act however we need to." The simple certainty in those words sent a chill through the room, not because they were threatening, but because everyone present understood that Naruto had the power to back them up. 5 years of operating as a shadow cage had refined his abilities to levels that made his performance against Kaguya look restrained by comparison. "There's one more thing," Ino said, producing another sealed scroll. "Long-range intelligence suggests that this isolationist movement might not be entirely organic." Meaning someone with access to significant resources has been funding coordination between the traditionalist factions. Someone who benefits from a return to the old system. Sasuke's Sharingan activated unconsciously, spinning as he processed this information. Foreign influence. Possibly, or it could be domestic actors who lost power in the transition and want to regain it. Ino spread out additional intelligence reports. "We're tracking 3 potential sources, but the funding is being laundered through so many intermediaries that definitive identification will take time." "Time we might not have," Kakashi observed. Which is why we need to be prepared for multiple scenarios, Naruto said. Best case, this is just normal political resistance that can be addressed through dialogue and compromise. Worst case, it's a coordinated attempt to destabilize everything we've built. And middle case? Middle case is that good people are being manipulated into making bad choices by actors they don't realize are pulling their strings. Naruto stood, his presence seeming to fill the room, which means our job is to expose the manipulation while protecting the people being manipulated. As they prepared to leave, Kakashi called out one final question. Naruto, if it comes down to it, if the choice is between preserving the system or preserving the principles, which do you choose? It was the question that went to the heart of everything, the tension between maintaining order and protecting freedom, between respecting democratic choices and preventing those choices from leading to disaster. Naruto paused in the doorway, considering his answer carefully. I choose to make sure it never comes down to that, he said finally. But if it does, I choose the principles. Systems can be rebuilt. Some things once lost never come back. 2 weeks later at the Cage Summit location. The neutral territory chosen for the summit was a testament to how much the world had changed. Instead of a hidden fortress designed for defense, the meeting was being held in an open pavilion surrounded by gardens and markets where people from all nations could mingle freely. Or at least that was the plan, Naruto thought as he observed the heavily armed delegations and the suspicious glances being exchanged between former allies. He stood on a hillside overlooking the summit grounds, his enhanced senses tracking the movements of dozens of political figures, their guards, and the less obvious operatives who moved through the crowd like sharks through water. Tensions are higher than expected, Sasuke reported, appearing beside him with the fluid grace that marked all of his movements. 3 different delegations have brought what amounts to small armies, and the traditional faction is coordinating more openly than intelligence suggested. Any sign of our mystery benefactor? Not directly, but there's definitely someone pulling strings behind the scenes. Too much coordination, too much funding, too much sophisticated strategy for this to be organic resistance. Naruto nodded, his attention split between the political theater below and the subtle currents of chakra and emotion that his enhanced senses could detect. Something was wrong, not just the normal tension of high-stakes negotiations, but something deeper and more dangerous. There, he said suddenly, his gaze fixing on a figure in expensive robes moving through the crowd with casual authority, the man in blue and gold near the Eastern delegation. Sasuke's sharing and activated, tracking the indicated target. I see him. Chakra's signature suggests high-level training, but he's not on any of the official lists. More than that, his emotional resonance. Naruto frowned, trying to identify what his enhanced senses were telling him. He feels familiar, like someone I should recognize but don't. Before Sasuke could respond, their communication network crackled to life with Ino's voice. Priority alert, intelligence breakthrough on the funding source. You're not going to like this. Reports, Naruto said quietly, activating the hidden microphone that allowed him to communicate without obvious movement. The money is coming from remnants of the old daimyo system. Specifically, former nobles who lost power when the economic integration protocols eliminated their monopolies on inter-village trade. The information hit like a cold wave. The daimyo system, the feudal lords who had traditionally ruled the ninja villages as military assets, had been one of the casualties of the new paradigm. Where once they had controlled trade and diplomacy while ninja provided security, now the villages operated as independent entities with direct relationships. Of course, Naruto thought grimly, we eliminated an entire power structure and assumed everyone would just accept it gracefully. How much influence do they still have? Sasuke asked. More than we realized. Turns out that when you control trade routes for centuries, you develop a lot of connections that don't just disappear when the official system changes. Ino's voice carried a note of frustration. They've been quietly funding the traditionalist movement while publicly supporting integration. Playing both sides, Naruto mused. Support integration publicly to avoid suspicion, fund resistance privately to create the chaos they need to regain relevance. Exactly, and there's more. Intelligence suggests they're planning something dramatic for today's session, something designed to prove that the new system can't handle a real crisis. A false flag operation, Naruto realized. Create a crisis, let the integration supporters fail to handle it, then step in with a solution that happens to require returning to the old system. Ino, I need you to coordinate with all our assets in the area. High alert, but stay hidden unless I give the word. Naruto's voice took on the tone of absolute command that had developed over years of leading operations that couldn't afford failure. Sasuke, can you get closer to that man in blue without alerting him? Already moving. As Sasuke dissolved into shadows with the technique that had made him one of the most feared operatives in the ninja world, Naruto allowed his own abilities to expand outward. Observation Haki spread like an invisible net, cataloging every person in the summit area, their emotional states, their intentions, their capabilities. What he found made his blood run cold. Too many people here aren't who they claim to be, he realized. This isn't just political manipulation, it's a trap. The realization came just as the first explosion echoed across the summit grounds. In the pavilion, chaos erupted as the peaceful meeting devolved into panic. The explosion had been precisely placed, not to kill anyone important, but to create maximum fear and confusion. Delegates dove for cover, guards drew weapons, and in the space of seconds, 5 years of careful diplomatic progress teetered on the edge of collapse. This is exactly what we feared, shouted the Tsuchikage, his voice carrying clearly over the chaos. The integration system has made us weak, vulnerable to attack. We need to return to the old ways, to the strength that kept us safe. Other traditionalist voices joined his, turning the crisis into a political opportunity with practiced efficiency. But Naruto's enhanced senses caught something the others missed. The timing was too perfect, the responses too coordinated. This was planned, he confirmed, every part of it. A second explosion rocked the grounds, and this time Naruto saw the source, not external attackers, but planted charges detonated by someone with intimate knowledge of the summit's security arrangements. Inside job, but how deep does it go? Naruto, Sasuke's voice crackled through their communication network. The man in blue, I've identified him, it's Gato's son. The name hit like a lightning bolt. Gato, the corrupt businessman who had terrorized Wave Country years ago, whose defeat had been one of Team 7's first real victories. Apparently, his legacy had survived his death. He's coordinating with at least 6 other individuals scattered through the crowd. They're not just funding this, they're running it directly. Evidence. Working on it, but Naruto, there's something else. I can see at least 3 more charges planted around the pavilion if they detonate those. Mass casualties. The integration movement dies in blood and fire, and the traditionalists get exactly the crisis they need to justify returning to isolation. Stop them, Naruto said, his voice carrying absolute authority. All of them now. What happened next would be talked about for generations. Naruto moved with speed that made his combat against Kaguya look restrained. One moment he was on the hillside overlooking the summit, the next he was in the pavilion itself, his presence announced by the sudden pressure of Conqueror's Haki that made every person in the area freeze. Everyone remain calm, he said, his voice somehow carrying clearly despite the chaos. This situation is under control. The effect was immediate and dramatic, not just because of his power, but because everyone present recognized him. Naruto Uzumaki, hero of the Fourth Great War, defeater of Kaguya Otsutsuki. When he said a situation was under control, people believed him. You have no authority here, the Tsuchikage protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I have the authority of someone who refuses to let good people die for political theater, Naruto replied calmly. And I have evidence that what's happening here isn't what it appears to be. As if summoned by his words, Sasuke materialized in the center of the pavilion with 3 unconscious figures, the would-be bombers, their weapons and communication devices confiscated. The explosions weren't attacks, Sasuke announced, his voice carrying the clinical authority of someone presenting evidence. They were staged distractions designed to create panic and justify a return to isolationist policies. These men were hired by a coalition of former daimyo who have been funding the traditionalist movement. That's impossible, stammered one of the isolationist leaders. Is it? Ino's voice came from speakers hidden throughout the pavilion. When had she arranged those? Followed by recorded conversations that detailed the entire conspiracy. Voices of former nobles discussing payment schedules, coordination strategies, and the ultimate goal of destabilizing the integration movement. The effect on the crowd was immediate. Delegates who had been ready to abandon cooperation in favor of security suddenly found themselves confronting the reality that their fears had been deliberately manufactured. How do we know this evidence is real? Demanded another traditionalist, but his protest sounded hollow even to himself. Because, Naruto said quietly, you're going to verify it. Every piece of intelligence, every recorded conversation, every financial transaction. You're going to investigate this thoroughly, and you're going to do it together, representatives from every faction working as a team. It was a masterful political stroke. Instead of simply presenting evidence and demanding acceptance, he was inviting the opposition to participate in its verification, making them partners in uncovering the truth rather than opponents to be defeated. And if the evidence doesn't hold up, asked the Tsuchikage, though his tone suggested he already suspected it would. Then you'll have my apology and my support for whatever system you choose to implement, Naruto replied, but if it does hold up, then we'll have to acknowledge that our concerns were being manipulated, the Tsuchikage finished quietly. 3 hours later, the investigation had been swift and thorough, with representatives from every faction working together, and with Sasuke's sharing and confirming the authenticity of documents and Ino's intelligence network providing additional corroborating evidence, the scope of the conspiracy became undeniable. 17 former daimyo coordinating across 6 countries, reported the lead investigator. Total funding in excess of 50 million ryo, with detailed plans to destabilize the integration movement and position themselves as the solution to the chaos they created. The mood in the pavilion had shifted completely. Where hours before there had been suspicion and fear, now there was something else, the shared outrage of people who realized they'd been manipulated. The question now, said the Mizukage, is what we do about it. We continue what we started, Naruto said firmly. We build the world we want to live in, and we make sure that people who try to manipulate us for their own gain can't succeed. And how do we do that? By choosing to trust each other despite our differences, by working together even when it's difficult, by remembering that cooperation doesn't mean weakness, it means we're strong enough to admit we're stronger together than apart. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Not just to continue the integration protocols, but to strengthen them, to create oversight mechanisms that would prevent future manipulation, to build systems that were transparent enough that conspiracy couldn't take root. This is what victory actually looks like, Naruto thought as he watched former opponents shaking hands and making plans, not defeating enemies but turning them into allies. That evening, back at the Tower of Shadows, today went better than expected, Ino said as she compiled the final reports from the summit. The integration movement is stronger than it was this morning, and we've identified most of the remaining opposition networks. For now, Sasuke cautioned, people like Gato's son don't give up easily. They'll adapt, find new approaches, try different angles. Let them, Naruto said calmly. Every time they try to tear down what we're building, we'll be there to stop them. And every time we stop them, more people will understand what we're really fighting for. Which is the right to choose. Naruto moved to the window, looking out over a village that bore little resemblance to the one he'd grown up in. The freedom to build something better without having to fight wars to defend it. The possibility that the next generation won't have to carry the burdens we've carried. Ino joined him at the window, her hand finding his with the easy familiarity of 5 years together. Do you think we'll succeed? In the long term, I mean. I think we'll succeed for as long as people are willing to choose cooperation over conflict, Naruto replied. And when they stop making that choice, well, we'll be there to remind them why they started making it in the first place. Forever. For as long as it takes. As the night deepened around them, 3 people stood together and watched the lights of a peaceful village twinkle to life. Each light represented choices, families choosing to trust their neighbors, merchants choosing to trade fairly, children choosing to play together regardless of which clan they came from. Small choices but important ones, the kind that built worlds one decision at a time. And in the shadows between the lights, unseen but ever present, the guardians of those choices kept their eternal watch. 20 years had passed since the Valley of the End, and the world bore little resemblance to the one that had emerged from the Fourth Great Ninja War. From the observation deck of the Tower of Shadows, now expanded into a complex that served as both headquarters and training facility for a new generation of peacekeepers, Naruto watched the sun rise over a landscape that would have been unimaginable to his younger self. The hidden village system existed only in history books. In its place, a network of interconnected city-states stretched across the continent, each specializing in different aspects of human knowledge and culture. Trade flowed freely between former enemies, children learned multiple languages as a matter of course, and the word war had become something parents used to scare misbehaving children rather than a practical reality. "We actually did it," Naruto thought, a smile tugging at his lips. "We built something better." "Admiring your handiwork." Naruto turned to see Sasuke approaching, his dark hair now streaked with silver despite his relatively young age. The years of operating as a shadow cage had taken their toll, not in terms of regret, but in the accumulated weight of decisions that affected millions of lives. "Our handiwork," Naruto corrected, "and I was thinking about how quiet it is." "Quiet? When was the last time we had to intervene in anything more serious than a trade dispute? 6 months? 8? Sasuke considered this. The incident with the rogue research facility was 9 months ago, and that was resolved through negotiation rather than force. "Exactly," Naruto gestured toward the horizon where the early morning light illuminated farms and workshops and schools where children learned to build rather than destroy. "We're becoming obsolete." "Is that a problem?" "It's the goal." They stood in comfortable silence, two men who had shaped the world through their choices and were now watching that world outgrow its need for them. Below, in the training yards of the tower complex, a new generation of peacekeepers practiced techniques that blended martial arts with diplomacy, strength with wisdom. "The academy graduation is this afternoon," Sasuke mentioned, "final class of the old system." "I know, hard to believe we're finally here." The academy graduation he referred to wasn't the traditional 12-year-old ceremony that had once marked the beginning of a ninja's military career. Under the new system, students completed their basic education at 18, then chose their specialization based on aptitude and interest rather than village need. Some became artisans, others merchants, still others chose the path of peacekeeping that had replaced the old ninja ranks. But this particular graduation was special. It marked the end of the transition period. The last students who remembered the old system were moving on to adult responsibilities, leaving behind a generation that had never known war as anything more than historical study. "Speaking of graduations," Sasuke continued, "Ino wanted me to remind you about the ceremony tonight." Naruto's smile widened, as if I could forget. The ceremony in question wasn't just any graduation, it was their own. After 20 years of operating outside official channels, the Shadow Cage system was being formally disbanded, not because it had failed, but because it had succeeded beyond all expectations. Mission accomplished, he thought. The world no longer needs guardians operating in the shadows because it's learned to guard itself. Later that afternoon, at the academy graduation, the ceremony took place in the Great Amphitheater, a massive outdoor venue that could accommodate representatives from every city-state in the Continental Alliance. Where once such gatherings had required extensive security and careful diplomatic protocols, now families from former enemy nations sat together, their children playing in the aisles while their parents discussed everything from crop rotations to artistic techniques. Naruto sat in the section reserved for distinguished guests, though he'd tried to decline the honor. Beside him, Ino adjusted the formal robes she'd been convinced to wear for the occasion, her expression a mixture of pride and amusement. Nervous, she asked quietly. "About the speech, always." "About tonight?" That was a different question entirely. Tonight marked not just the end of their official responsibilities, but the beginning of something new. After 20 years of putting the world's needs before their own, they were finally free to choose what came next. Excited, he admitted, terrified, looking forward to it. "Good answer." The graduation ceremony itself was a testament to how much had changed. Instead of students receiving forehead protectors that marked them as weapons of their village, they received scrolls that certified them as citizens of the world, free to pursue their chosen paths wherever those paths might lead. When Naruto was called to give the keynote address, he stood before an audience that represented every nation, every culture, every dream that had driven the transformation of their world. 25 years ago, he began, his voice carrying easily across the amphitheater, I stood in this same village and declared that I would become Hokage. I thought that was the highest goal I could achieve, to lead one village, to protect one people, to be responsible for one small piece of the world. Laughter rippled through the audience. The story of Naruto's childhood ambitions had become legendary, but not in the way he'd expected. I was wrong, he continued. Not about the importance of protection or leadership or responsibility, but about the scope of what was possible. You see, I thought small because the world I knew was small. Hidden villages, isolated from each other, competing for resources, training children to fight wars that their parents had started. The amphitheater had grown quiet, every person present understanding that they were witnessing something historic. But all of you proved that the world could be bigger than that. That cooperation was stronger than competition. That building together was more powerful than tearing apart. Naruto's gaze swept across the crowd, taking in faces from every nation, every background, every dream that made up their transformed world. You chose to trust each other. You chose to work together. You chose to believe that your children deserved better than the cycles of conflict you inherited. And because you made those choices, because you had the courage to build something new, these young people, he gestured toward the graduating students, will never know what it means to be afraid of their neighbors. They'll never have to choose between loyalty to their village and loyalty to their conscience. They'll never have to carry the weight of wars they didn't start and conflicts they didn't choose. The applause that followed was more than appreciation, it was celebration. The sound of people who recognized that they had accomplished something unprecedented in human history. So as these students go forward into their chosen paths, Naruto concluded, remember what made their freedom possible. Remember that every choice to cooperate instead of compete, every decision to trust instead of fear, every moment when you chose to build instead of destroy, those choices created the world they'll inherit. And remember that the work isn't finished. It never will be. Every generation will face the choice between fear and hope, between isolation and cooperation, between the familiar cage and unfamiliar freedom. The world you've built isn't guaranteed to last. It's only as strong as the people willing to choose it, day after day, decision by decision. But if today is any indication, he said, his voice growing warmer, that world is in very good hands. That evening at the Tower of Shadows, the formal ceremony disbanding the Shadow Cage system was deliberately small, just the core team that had made it work, along with a few close friends and allies. Kakashi was there, now retired from active duty, but still serving as an advisor to the Continental Alliance. Shikamaru represented the intelligence networks that had grown from their early operations. Sakura had come from her position as head of the Integrated Medical Corps. And in the center of it all, Naruto and Sasuke stood together one last time as official partners in the impossible task of keeping the world safe from itself. Do you have any regrets? Kakashi asked as they gathered around the table where so many critical decisions had been made over the years. About the system, no, Sasuke replied immediately. We accomplished what we set out to do. And personally, Sasuke glanced at Naruto, something unspoken passing between them. We sacrificed a lot of normal life for this. Relationships, family time, the simple pleasure of not having to worry about global consequences every time we made a decision. Was it worth it? Look around, Naruto said simply. 20 years of peace. Children who have never seen war, people who choose their own paths instead of having them chosen for them. Yeah, it was worth it. What comes next? Shikamaru asked. That's the beautiful part, Ino said, moving to stand beside Naruto. For the first time in our adult lives, we get to choose based on what we want rather than what the world needs. And what do you want? Naruto looked around the room at the people who had become his family through shared purpose and mutual sacrifice. I want to see what happens when good people are free to be good without having to fight for the right. More specifically, a house by the ocean, Ino said, smiling. Somewhere we can watch the sunrise without having to wonder what crisis it might bring. Children, Naruto added, a chance to raise the next generation in the world we built instead of the one we inherited. Time, Sasuke contributed. Time to figure out who I am when I'm not carrying the weight of ancient grudges or modern responsibilities. Normal problems, Sakura laughed. Arguments about what to have for dinner instead of how to prevent international incidents. As the formal ceremony concluded and the group began to disperse, Naruto found himself standing alone with Sasuke on the observation deck where they'd spent so many hours planning operations and discussing philosophy. "One last question," Sasuke said. "Do you think Itachi would be proud of what we built?" Naruto considered this carefully. "I think he'd be amazed that we managed to build anything at all. He spent his whole life making impossible choices to preserve a system that was fundamentally broken. We got to make different choices, harder ones in some ways, but cleaner ones." Cleaner. "We never had to choose between our principles and our people. We found ways to protect both." Naruto smiled, and in that expression, Sasuke could see echoes of the boy who had once refused to give up on a friend everyone else had written off. That's what he really wanted, I think, for us to have choices he never had. "Think we'll stay in touch, without the world ending to bring us together, I mean." "Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice carrying gentle amusement, "you're going to be the best man at my wedding next month. I think we're stuck with each other." 1 month later, on a beach overlooking the ocean. The wedding was everything Naruto had never known he wanted. Small, intimate, filled with people who mattered rather than political necessities. Ino looked radiant in simple white robes, her blonde hair catching the afternoon sun as they stood together before an altar decorated with flowers from every nation in the alliance. Sasuke, true to his word, stood beside Naruto as his best man, while Sakura served as Ino's maid of honor. The ceremony was conducted by Uruka-sensei, the teacher who had first shown Naruto what it meant to be believed in. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when the couple exchanged vows they had written themselves. "Naruto," Ino said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, "you taught me that love isn't about finding someone who completes you, it's about finding someone who inspires you to become complete on your own. You showed me what it means to stand beside someone not because you need them, but because you choose them. You stood with me when standing with me meant facing impossible odds. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You chose to love someone who carried the weight of the world, and you helped me learn that the weight was lighter when it was shared. I promise to keep choosing you every day for the rest of our lives, not because I have to, but because I want to, because freedom means nothing if you don't use it to protect what matters most." When it was Naruto's turn, he took her hands and spoke words that came from both his heart and the memories of another man who had understood what it meant to treasure freedom above all else. "Ino, you taught me the difference between power and strength. Power is about what you can make others do. Strength is about what you choose to do yourself." His voice carried across the gathering, reaching friends who had stood with them through transformation and strangers who had come to witness history. "You have the strength to choose hope over fear, cooperation over competition, love over safety. You stood with me not because I was strong, but because you believed I could become stronger. You saw possibilities I couldn't see, potential I didn't know I had. You chose to love the person I was becoming rather than the person I had been. I promise to keep growing into someone worthy of that choice. I promise to use whatever strength I have to protect your freedom to choose, every day, whatever makes you happiest. And I promise to keep building the world we dreamed of, one choice at a time, for the rest of our lives." The kiss that followed was witnessed by representatives of every nation, but it felt as private and perfect as if they were the only two people in the world. 5 years later. The house by the ocean was everything they had dreamed, simple, comfortable, surrounded by gardens where Ino grew flowers that had once been symbols of different nations' power. Now they were just beautiful, valued for their own sake rather than their political significance. Naruto sat on the porch watching 3-year-old Minato, named for the 4th Hokage but free to choose his own path, chase butterflies through the garden while Ino worked nearby, her hands in the earth and her face peaceful in a way that still took his breath away. This is what we were fighting for, he thought, not the grand gestures or the historic moments, but this, the simple freedom to be happy. A familiar chakra signature approached, and Naruto looked up to see Sasuke walking up the path from the village. His former partner looked content. The sharp edges of old pain had smoothed into something approaching peace. "How's retirement treating you?" Sasuke asked, settling into the chair beside Naruto. "Can't complain. The most difficult decision I made today was whether to have fish or chicken for lunch." "Scandalous, what did you choose?" "Fish. Ino threatened to cook for me if I chose chicken." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the next generation play in safety they had helped create. In the distance, ships passed by carrying goods and people between nations that had once been enemies. Overhead, birds flew without regard for borders that had once been defended with blood. "Any regrets?" Sasuke asked, the same question that had ended their official partnership years ago. "None," Naruto replied immediately. "You. I regret that it took us so long to figure out that happiness was an option. Better late than never." "True." Sasuke paused, then asked the question that had brought him here. "The new Peacekeeping Academy has asked me to teach a course on conflict resolution. They want you to co-instruct." "Teaching?" Naruto considered this. "What would we teach?" "That most conflicts aren't really about what people think they're about. That the strongest person in the room is usually the one who doesn't need to prove it. That sometimes the best way to win is to help your opponent find what they're really fighting for." Wise words from someone who once believed that strength was everything. "I had a good teacher." They were interrupted by young Minato running up to the porch, his blonde hair wild and his blue eyes bright with the confidence of a child who had never known fear. "Papa," he called out, scrambling into Naruto's lap. "Uncle Sasuke, Mama says dinner is ready." As they gathered around the table, Ino, Naruto, Sasuke, and the child who represented everything they had fought to preserve, the conversation turned to ordinary things. Garden plans, village gossip, whether Minato was old enough to start learning basic chakra control. Normal problems, Naruto thought with deep satisfaction. Normal joys. Later that evening, after Sasuke had returned to his own home and Minato was safely asleep, Naruto and Ino stood together on their porch, watching the stars emerge in a sky that no longer carried the threat of war. "Do you think it will last?" Ino asked quietly. "The peace we built." "As long as people remember what the alternative looks like," Naruto replied. "As long as they keep choosing cooperation over conflict, trust over fear. And if they forget, then someone else will have to remind them, but that's not our job anymore." Ino leaned against him, her warmth a constant reminder of how much good could come from a single choice to trust. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had helped reshape the world and were now free to enjoy the results. Around them, the night was filled with the sounds of peace, children sleeping safely, neighbors talking quietly, the ocean waves that recognized no borders and threatened no one. In the distance, lights twinkled in villages where former enemies now lived as friends. Trade routes that had once been battlefields now carried goods and ideas and dreams. Children who might have been soldiers instead learned to build, to heal, to create rather than destroy. This is what freedom looks like, Naruto thought as he held the woman he loved under stars that shone on a world finally at peace. Not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of choice. The right to build something beautiful and know that it will be protected by people who understand its value. This is what Shanks would have wanted, a world where everyone can pursue their dreams without fear. This is what Itachi died hoping we could create, a future where children don't have to carry the burdens of their parents' failures. This is what we built, one choice at a time, one person at a time, one act of faith at a time. As the night deepened around them, Naruto Uzumaki, former Jinchuriki, former ninja, former Shadow Cage, now simply a husband and father and free citizen of a world he had helped create, smiled and knew that the most important battle he would ever fight had been won not through strength or technique or power, but through the simple, revolutionary act of choosing love over fear. And in that choice, the world had found its freedom. In the great library of New Konoha, children gathered for their weekly history lesson, their faces bright with the curiosity of those who had never known anything but peace. Their teacher, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, opened a book that had been passed down through generations. "Today," she said, "we're going to learn about the time when the world was divided into hidden villages, when children became soldiers, and when people believed that strength meant the power to hurt others." "That sounds scary," said a small boy in the front row. "It was," the teacher agreed, "but it's also the story of how people learned to choose something better. It's the story of a boy who carried a terrible burden and found a way to transform it into something beautiful. It's the story of friendship and sacrifice and the power of refusing to give up hope even when hope seemed impossible." "Is it true?" asked a girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Every word, the teacher said, smiling. And the most important part is this: the choices they made, the courage they showed, the love they chose over fear, those things are still possible. They're possible for every one of you every single day. Because freedom isn't something you inherit, she continued, echoing words spoken long ago by people who had shaped the world through their choices. It's something you choose again and again until choosing it becomes as natural as breathing. The children listened with rapt attention, already dreaming of the choices they would make, the contributions they would offer, the world they would help build in their turn. And in that classroom, in those dreams, in those choices yet to be made, the legacy of Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who became an emperor, the Jinchuriki who chose freedom, the shadow cage who built peace, lived on. Forever. The end. And there you have it, guys, the incredible journey of Naruto Uzumaki from lonely Jinchuriki to Shadow Cage, who literally changed the world. We watched him go from that kid who just wanted to be acknowledged to someone who chose love over power, built lasting peace through understanding, and created a legacy that freed entire generations from the cycle of war. The way he integrated Shanks' memories with his own growth formed that beautiful partnership with Ino, and even brought Sasuke back from the darkness, absolutely legendary stuff. What was your favorite moment from this epic? Was it that first Conqueror's Haki awakening against Haku, the secret training with Itachi and Kisame, or maybe that final battle in the Valley of the End where understanding finally won over revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading what gets you guys hyped. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know what other absolutely broken crossover concepts you want to see next. Should we explore more reincarnation scenarios, or maybe dive into some other insane power fusions? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.